What character would realistically learn magic in Marvel? This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 651, Fun People Won't Give Up. What does it mean to be alive? This thought revolved and echoed in Thor's mind for less than a second. Then, the wizard sat up from the tactical table in front of him. The speed and magnitude of the action were shocking. It was a real-life version of a dying person sitting up in shock. Thor almost couldn't stand. Don't get me wrong. He was not scared by this scene. The reason why he lost his composure was because of the terrifying pressure on his Shenyan at this time. That feeling made him almost want to summon thunder, which was indescribable. In his opinion, it was almost equivalent to facing the chaos storm in the universe with his flesh and blood. Death was just around the corner. The hairs on his arm stood up, and the divine power surged in his body. He almost changed into armor directly. Thor called his name uncertainly. This scene was too weird. What's more, Thor didn't remember that the wizard had mastered such a terrifying power. He looked ordinary when he didn't take action. There was nothing special about him except that he was handsome. Facing his call, Shenyan simply raised his right hand, signaling Thor not to speak. He touched his closed eyes with his left hand, and then sighed. "Yes, it's me, Thor. Long time no see, brother. I hope I didn't scare you and your friends. Is this lady called Gamora? I have some impression of you." His tone was gentle and his attitude was friendly, but Gamora couldn't help feeling a little scared. This absurd illusion made her instinctively fold her arms and began to rub her arms. Then, she found that the wizard was communicating with him with his eyes closed. Thor naturally discovered this problem. "Your eyes? It's okay, just a small side effect." Shenyan smiled, raised his hand and brushed the air beside him. A gap was opened in the space, and he reached in and took out a black cloth strip that was shining with starlight. Then, a red-gold light flashed in his hand, making the starlight on the cloth strip more intense. "Do me a favor, Thor." The wizard handed the cloth to Thor. "I need you to fill this with thunder, with your strongest power, just like that time when you thought Odin was dead." Thor didn't ask any more questions, but just reached out to take it. It has always been like this. The wizard uses his brain, and he or someone else does it. They work together seamlessly and have never made any mistakes. But Gamora was shocked by the actions of the two. "Wait, here." She quickly held down Thor's hand. "This is on the ship, Thor. You will split the ship in half." Thor shook his head at her firmly. "No, you won't." Gamora looked at him in disbelief. "Don't you know how destructive your thunder is? Our ship can't withstand it. Even if it is equipped with the reactive shield of the Nova Corps, it will never be possible." "No, ma'am." Shenyan, who still had his eyes closed, turned his head accurately to where she was standing, with a warm and natural smile on his face. He said, "Saul knows this, but he knows something else. He will never let this happen." Saul grinned, and violent thunder flashed in his eyes. The terrifying thunder and lightning that was enough to destroy the surface of the planet began to move in the cabin. According to common sense, the ship should have been destroyed in the first moment. However, those violent thunder and lightning were absorbed into the black cloth strips in just 1 second. "Okay." Saul handed it back, and then he asked his question. "What do you want my thunder for?" "This is a very long story." Shenyan put the cloth strip on himself and covered his eyes. He began to explain. "However, I can try to keep it short. To put it in a more popular way, I need several different types of power to alternately disperse the power of death in my eyes. Because I have been resurrected from the dead, they are now a little excited. If I leave them alone, anyone and anything I see may die." After hearing the words "power of death," Thor's expression, which had just seemed relatively relaxed, suddenly changed. He narrowed his eyes, and at this moment, he looked a bit like Odin, except that his face was not so old. They were simply cast from the same mold. Thor has never been stupid. He just doesn't need to use his brain most of the time. When you can crush most enemies with strength, using your brain becomes a luxury. Thor asked in a deep voice, "Is it that death?" "Yes, it's the death you think of." Shenyan smiled at him, jumped off the tactical table, and straightened his black robe. But this method is ultimately a temporary solution and not a permanent solution. I'm afraid I'll have to live with my eyes blindfolded for a long time. I still can't understand it. Thor shook his head. How did you get in touch with death? She does exist, but no one in our universe has ever successfully summoned her. It's not me who got in touch with her, Thor. Shenyan sighed helplessly and put his hand on the bulkhead of the cabin. A sudden vibration came and a buzzing sound rose from the soles of their feet. In the suddenly lit blue light, Shenyan said, "She found me." Looking at Thor's blank eyes, the wizard who had just used magic to add some special fuel to the ship smiled. He knew that he had to tell the whole story again, otherwise Thor's curiosity would not be satisfied and he would keep asking. Strange shook his head slightly uncomfortably. Not long ago, their disappeared magic returned. The process of returning is as confusing as the process of disappearing. The only thing they have in common is that neither of them makes people feel comfortable. Ah, I thought I would never feel this kind of dizziness again after I quit drinking, Rajiv complained and shook his head. The performance of the three people in the Sanctum Sanctorum was similar. A huge amount of magic returned to their bodies and brains in an instant, and the forgotten knowledge came back. But the human brain is not a computer, which can support a huge amount of data exchange in a short period of time. When did you quit drinking? Wang held his head and asked gloomily. The time when I was pulled into his spiritual world by the evil wizard with the 15 layers of illusion he arranged, Rajiv replied. His expression was filled with a chill. I was drunk there for 37 years. After I woke up, I couldn't hold things normally for 5 days. My hands were shaking so much. Strange didn't join in their chat. He was busy communicating with the magic nodes in the Sanctum Sanctorum and rearranging the rebellious barrier. At this moment, the alarm in the Sanctum Sanctorum suddenly sounded. More updates tomorrow. By the way, I won't include Thor 4 and the new Marvel series of movies. What rubbish they are shooting. It's a waste of Bale's acting skills. Chapter 652 The Blind Man. The three reacted very quickly, and different lights lit up in their hands. Strange attacked. Wang cast a defensive magic circle, and Rajiv formed an aging curse with his left hand and a sealing formation with his right hand, ready to treat the invaders of the sanctuary to a feast at any time. Unfortunately, none of their spells could be used, because the person who came was Scythoan. The head of the Hades poked out from the air that seemed to have a crack, and thick darkness lingered in his eyes. The Hades, who was famous for being a fun-loving person and absurd, unexpectedly looked extremely serious at this time. Strange instinctively felt something was wrong. People who have always been angry become calm, people who are always calm become furious, and clowns in the circus cry and cry. These can all be called abnormal phenomena, and any abnormal thing can be considered a bad thing. Scythoan walked out of his dark dimension. This great Hades, who had not really left his dimension for more than 100,000 years, once again stood on his former hometown, but he did not seem to miss it very much. He took out a lavender gem from his bosom, and Strange frowned. It was the Dynamo's stone, which was stored in the cenotaph of the Ancient One and was the core of the Great Barrier. How could it be in Scython's hands? However, Hades didn't want to play dumb with him at this time. He just stuffed the gem into Strange's hand and said, "This is what he gave me. Don't ask, and don't say more. Listen, I have news to tell you. Be prepared." The three looked at each other, and finally, Strange nodded. Shenyan is dead, Scython said simply. He and the outsiders died together. I have said everything here, Supreme Sorcerer. From now on, the earth depends on you. After saying that, he turned around and returned to his own dimension without any nostalgia. What? Strange's expression was as if he didn't understand what Scython meant at all, and his brain crashed for a while. He stared at the front where Scython disappeared in confusion, and gradually felt a strong sense of weightlessness. Dead? Shenyan died? He would die? How is this possible? The three were still lingering in sadness and doubt, but Zisong put on a smiling face and sat happily on his throne to watch the show. We all know that a person who loves fun will never change his bad habits. He has been paying attention to Shenyan's condition, and of course he knows that he has come back from the dead. The reason why he came here to inform the three is because Zisong wants to watch a good show. This kind of show is not common, letting a living person return to Earth to attend his own funeral, and the kind where everyone takes turns to go on stage to mourn. Thinking of that scene, he almost laughed out loud. If it weren't for the eye demon beside him, Zai-Song would have laughed so hard that he fell off the throne. The eye demon looked at him speechlessly, and moved his tentacles a little away from Zai-Song with a little discomfort. Even an ancient like him couldn't understand Zai-Song's bad taste. "So," he asked directly, "if you do this, aren't you afraid that Shenyan will find out and come to trouble you in the future?" The smile on Zai-Thorn's face froze for a moment, but it didn't last long. His right-hand fingers jumped back and forth quickly on the armrest of the throne. The god of Hades seemed to have made up his mind and smiled again. "If I could see his expression when he attended his own funeral, it would be worth it even if I was beaten up." I can't understand. Shumagalath's eyes were full of doubts. Even he couldn't understand Zai-Thorn's chaotic soul. He simply raised his huge tentacles and opened a portal to the outer dimension. He was going back to the end of the chaotic time and continued to devour souls. The fight with those dimensional demons consumed a lot of energy. At the last moment before leaving, he seemed to remember something and asked, "By the way, he has completely mastered the power of death. Does this mean that we have witnessed the birth of the only true apostle of death in the multiverse?" The underworld god Zai-Song shrugged and said, "I am not as knowledgeable as you, Shumagolas. I am just an insignificant Zai-Song in thousands of parallel universes, not the only one like you. So, I can't answer your question." Pretending. Shumagolas threw down this sentence, and his huge body like a mountain left here through the portal. As an existence at the end of the timeline, there can only be one eye demon in the entire multiverse at the same time. His specialness allows him to easily see through many things. This is the power after the precipitation of time. Because of this, he fully understands that this Zai-Song is lying, but he disdains to expose it. Wait, you went to another dimension with the tin can? Thor's eyes widened. "You didn't call me for this kind of thing?" Shenyan held a glass of Star Ranger cocktail made by Peter Star-Lord Quill. Hearing this, he calmly took a sip and replied without any sarcasm, "Alas, I couldn't contact you at that time, Thor. Otherwise, how could I take the reliable Tony to adventure in another dimension?" Thor frowned. "He is reliable? He was at his bachelor party. TSK, forget it." He wanted to say it, but he couldn't finish it. Asgardians take promises very seriously. He promised Tony not to tell anyone what happened that day, so he naturally had to keep this promise, no matter how much he disliked him. After all, regardless of anything else, a promise is a promise. At this time, they were sitting at the bar counter of the bar on the spaceship. Star-Lord was the guest bartender, and Gamora was sitting on the other side sipping a drink. After evacuating the queued passengers, there were only 4 of them left on the ship. After all, for the Guardians of the Galaxy, it's vacation now. Except for Gamora, few people can tolerate this guy Star-Lord. Shenyan drank the cocktail in his glass in one gulp and smiled mischievously at Thor. "Let's talk about you, Thor. As far as I know, you and Jane have broken up, right?" "Do you have to talk about this?" Thor scratched his cheek depressedly. Yes, I was dumped by her." "It doesn't matter, I'm completely relieved. At that time, I was indeed a spoiled child. It was normal for a strong and confident woman like her to look down on me at that time." "It's really surprising, man, you actually admit your problem." Peter interrupted and at the same time diligently filled Shenyan's cocktail with a very bright smile. "I haven't introduced myself to you yet, Mr. He. My name is Peter Quill, also known as Star-Lord." The order of the chapters is fucking reversed again. Have I really rushed too much recently? Chapter 653. He's probably really dead. Shenyan took another sip of the alien cocktail. It must be said that the complex flavors mixed together and exploded on the taste buds was very wonderful. Star-Lord's words made him smile. "I have heard of your name, Mr. Star-Lord." He spun the wine in the glass. The lights above the dance floor had not yet switched back to normal mode, and it was still the colorful and ambiguous light. The wine in the glass reflected the colorful light, which reflected the scenery of the universe outside the portal. "Have you heard of my name? When I was dealing with the Skrulls, the Nova Corps came to me. They thought that what I did was too horrific, Genocide is not something that a morally normal or mentally normal person should do. This is a completely crazy act. Shenyan took another sip of the wine, and Star-Lord's smile became a little awkward. The past that the wizard just talked about was known to everyone in the universe. Moreover, he didn't understand how he was related to the Nova Corps, so I asked them what to do about the Skrulls who kidnapped Earthlings and even set up human laboratories on Earth to conduct various experiments and plot invasion. I still remember what the guy sent by the Nova Corps said. He laughed, and the cloth covering his eyes made it impossible to see his eyes, but that smile was enough to make people feel cold. He said that the Nova Corps would intervene in this matter and ask the Skrulls to pay compensation. So I asked again, what to do with the dead Earthlings. The guy looked at me as if he saw an idiot who didn't know what was good for him. He was very shocked and very puzzled, and then told me that the technology of the Skrulls' compensation would greatly increase the technological level of the entire Earth, enough to become a true interstellar civilization. We will have planetary shuttles, or various extraordinary technologies that will make resources no longer unevenly distributed. I feel sorry for him. Shenyan shook his head. He still didn't understand what I wanted and what the Skrulls did. The Earth was a weak, newly discovered civilization at that time. The Skrull invasion was our first formal contact with extraterrestrial civilizations. They came to Earth, lurking for more than a decade, and played with the entire human society in the palm of their hands. They replaced various senior officials and infiltrated silently. They even kidnapped innocent people for human experiments. This is a naked and blatant invasion. If I agree to the Nova Corps request and let the Skrulls compensate us, then all races in the universe will probably reach a consensus. The wizard curled his lips. Earthlings are a race that can swallow this humiliation for some technology, and a race that can give up the lives of countless compatriots for technology. Unfortunately, we are not. Moreover, why don't they stop the Skrulls from stopping the invasion? Instead, they come to stop me, an Earthling who is exercising just revenge? Peter Quill felt dry mouth, and the slight joy he felt because his name was known by the wizard had disappeared without a trace. He felt a heavy pressure filling the bar, like cold sea water, drowning his mouth and nose, almost suffocating him. Fortunately, Thor spoke up to break the pervasive coldness. He rejected the Nova Corps man, and then exterminated the Skrulls. Until now, not many people in the universe remember this race and empire that once existed. But, he shrugged. Later, the Nova Corps believed that he had violated the laws of the universe and wanted to arrest him, and issued a bounty order. He probably saw your name at that time. You know this too? The wizard raised his eyebrows in surprise. I don't remember telling you about this. They all posted the bounty on Asgard. Although I told them to get out, I still saw the names of the hundreds of wanted criminals. You are the first one. Thor stretched out his hands and made an exaggerated gesture. There are too many charges to count. We even had a good discussion about what you did, but when I clicked on the introduction, there was only one. Don't you think it's cruel for me to exterminate the Skrulls? Thor grinned. I'm an Asgardian. Although I haven't fought alongside Odin, I am a warrior who has experienced many wars. I know what a war between races means. Once it starts, there will be no room for easing, only a fight to the death. What's more, no race can tolerate what the Skrulls have done. He pointed at himself very seriously. If they did the same thing to Asgard, I'm afraid I would make the same choice as you. The wizard smiled at him again, raised his head and drank the cocktail in the glass, stood up and left the bar. Let's not talk about this, Thor. I'm going to rest for a while. Please wake me up when we get to Earth. Okay? Then you have to rest for a long time. According to the speed, we still have 5 days to reach Earth. Hey, why don't you use your convenient portal spell? The wizard turned around, spread out his hands and shook his head helplessly at him. If I could, I would have opened the portal and gone back a long time ago. Resurrection from the dead is not as easy as you think, Thor. After saying that, he left, leaving behind only Peter, Gamora, who was still a little absent-minded, and Thor, who still hadn't drunk enough. Star-Lord's ship can accommodate 300 people, and there are many guest rooms. Shenyan should be staying in the best one at this time. The bed seems to have been bought from the planet Okros. where people specialize in making all kinds of extremely comfortable furniture. They have reached the pinnacle in this line. The bed that Shenyan was lying on has 740 different functions. It can be a water bed, a hammock, and even simulate the touch of the flesh. Not only that, it also has a series of complex functions such as hypnosis. However, Shenyan didn't need so many. He just turned this bed into a simple white wooden bed. At this moment, he was lying on the bed, gazing at the magnificent scenery outside the porthole with his mental tentacles. The scenery of the universe is never boring. No matter how many times you see it, she is always changing, and new scenery appears every moment. Just as he was concentrating on thinking, the soft light above his head suddenly dimmed for a moment, and the next second, Death was lying beside him. She appeared so naturally, and her posture was extremely lazy. The black skirt was made of unknown fabric, but it perfectly outlined her figure. Shenyan was too lazy to move, and just said calmly, "What's the matter?" "Just came to see my dear messenger." Death smiled. "Are your eyes okay?" "Your power is too strong, and the rest of the energy in my body has been suppressed. I'm trying to find a way to reconcile it." The wizard did not hide anything and revealed every detail. After all, in front of such a true creator god, what is the need to hide? "That's because you have completely mastered my authority." Death smiled slightly. "No one has ever done this. You killed yourself with authority, refused to sleep, and returned from my domain. From the moment you woke up, the 3 conditions for becoming my true messenger have all been met." 3 conditions? First, I have granted you some authority. Second, you understand the true meaning of death. Death sat up from the bed, stretched out his hand, and gently stroked his eye sockets covered by the cloth. Third, use authority to kill yourself and come back to life. Really harsh conditions. Shenyan tilted his head slightly to avoid her touch. "Do you really think someone can meet all 3 conditions? He has already appeared, right in front of me, isn't he?" The lights dimmed again, and when they came on, Death was already sitting by the bed. His dignified and elegant sitting posture made the simple bed look like a throne or something. "Really?" Shenyan smiled. "Death, a god who constitutes the basic existence of the world, would really set a condition that no one could possibly fulfill?" He recalled the description of the demon Shumagaras in the ancient books, existing at the end of time, and cannot be killed. And Shumagaras is the creation of death. Yes, for such an existence, time is just a toy that can be easily wiped out. She probably saw my existence through the torrent of time, and even my future. Death shook his head as if he could see what he knew and thought in his heart. "You guessed wrong, my messenger." She turned her head with a little melancholy. "I can't see your future. Among the countless universes, only this one has your existence. What's more, you can leave at any time, right? It's really an enviable freedom. But I don't think you would set a condition that cannot be fulfilled for no reason. Maybe it's because I don't want people to complete it." She stretched out her right hand and pressed it on the wizard's forehead. A black phantom flashed by, and she gently pulled off the cloth strip. The wizard opened his eyes and had returned to his normal appearance. The lights dimmed again for a moment, and Death disappeared in his room, leaving only a vague word: "Remember, you are my messenger. Don't forget to come to me if you are bullied." Shenyan closed his eyes with a strange look on his face. It was the first time he was told this. Strange stood in the conference room in a suit and tie, not knowing what to say. There were many people sitting in front of him. Tony and Rhodes sat together, 2 old men who had retired and were unkempt, sitting together and joking. Natasha Romanoff was wearing dungarees and even had a straw hat on her head that she hadn't taken off in time. Hawkeye sat next to her, with mud on his sleeves. The 2 were fertilizing the fields before they came. Natasha lived next door to Hawkeye's house after retirement, and the 2 families had a very good relationship. Sitting next to them was a man with a calm face, wearing a dirty sweater and a glove on one hand. Who else could it be but Bucky? Everyone was in high spirits, chatting with each other. No one noticed that Strange's expression was a little wrong. He pursed his lips, pulled up his left sleeve and looked at his watch. Not long after, there was a knock on the door. A big green-skinned guy cautiously poked his head in and took a look. He was relieved when he found that he knew everyone inside. "Hey, hello." Banner, who had merged with the Hulk, smiled brightly. "Long time no see." "Oh my God, Doc." Tony took off his glasses in shock. "What are you doing?" Banner seemed to be slow, but in fact he quickly came to the opposite side of him and Rhodes, pulled out a chair and sat down. The chair, which was obviously specially made for his body, accommodated him perfectly. The once always angry Hulk took off his glasses, smiled and nodded to everyone. "Yes, the theory that he said to make me accept myself has been realized by me. I have to say that I feel great now." His smile was accompanied by a sigh. "Hulk is actually an incarnation of my personality. He is a part of me. I have always been resisting him, but this is actually unnecessary." The conference room soon became lively. Everyone was chatting and talking, expressing their views on retirement life. Even Baki, who usually didn't say much, chatted with Banner. There was only one person except Strange. He was still standing in front of the conference table. His expression seemed calm, but in fact, his heart was turbulent. After a while, a voice suddenly sounded in the conversation, with a sense of fatigue that came from nowhere. "Everyone, I have something to say." "Why do you look like this, Strange?" Rhodes asked first, with a puzzled expression. The others also nodded in agreement. Tony looked at his face and raised his hand half-jokingly. "Another invasion? No, it's only been 2 days. By the way, where's he? Why didn't I see him?" Strange lowered his head and didn't make eye contact with anyone. He opened his mouth, his chest rose and fell a few times, and finally said the sentence. "He is dead." Tony's smile froze on his face, and the conference room suddenly became quiet. Everyone's expression was different, but they all had one thing in common: confusion. It was as if Strange was telling a joke in a strange language that they couldn't understand at all. Numbness rose from the soles of his feet, and Strange reached out and held a long table in the conference room. The dizziness rose to his brain again. However, the more he got to this point, the more sober he became, and even the words he didn't know where to start were spit out all at once. "He's dead." Zythorn told me himself. "The king and I tried every way to contact him, but there was no response. Even the search spell of the sanctuary could not find him. So, he opened his mouth, blinked, and took a deep breath from bottom to top. "I have to say this, he is probably really dead." There are also 2 chapters in one. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelist. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 654, Looking for Shenyan. After a long silence, Tony threw his sunglasses on the table. The slightly dull voice made Strange look up, and the first thing that caught his eye was Tony's complicated eyes. His voice became inexplicably hoarse. "Who did it?" This sentence seemed to be the fuse that detonated the bomb, igniting everyone's emotions. Banner seemed to have turned back into the Hulk at that moment, and his ferocious expression was completely unbearable to look at. He gritted his teeth and took several deep breaths to barely suppress the urge to smash the conference table with one punch. The smile on Rhodes' face disappeared, and he sat upright with an expressionless face, as if he had returned to his pre-retirement identity. Natasha and Clinton frowned immediately. The two were experienced agents who did not show their emotions, but their eyes were enough to explain a lot of things. Even Baki, who had no reaction to anything, couldn't help but clench his fists at this moment. "Yes, Strange," Banner asked with a heavy breath. "Who did it?" Facing everyone's gaze, Strange said painfully, "I don't know." "You don't know?" Tony asked incredulously. "Yeah, damn it, I don't know, I don't know." Strange gritted his teeth and roared this sentence. He rarely lost his temper like this, but he was a human being after all. Expecting humans to stay calm all the time is a hopeless luxury. He seemed to feel suffocated and pulled his tie so that he could breathe smoothly. Strange's face even turned red, and his blood rushed. He couldn't help but punch the conference table. "I can't find the murderer. I can't even know where his body is. Damn it, damn it, damn it." He cursed several times in a row before stopping, and his right palm was already swollen. Strange raised that hand and waved it in the air tremblingly. "I can't find it. No matter searching or locating, there is no trace of him." Even if I ask for help from Scythorn, it's useless. He said. Natasha stood up without saying a word. She came to Strange, put her hand on his arm, looked at him with concern, and said softly, "Don't get excited, okay? This is not your fault, Strange. We all know that every time he creates a new spell, he will use himself as an experiment. He may have invented a spell that can resist tracking. It's okay, it's okay, calm down." She comforted Strange and patted his arm gently. "You have to calm down." Tony pursed his lips and sat in his chair. His expression was very ugly. He stared at the ground with empty eyes, as if in a daze, but his hand stroked the temple of his sunglasses, again and again, as if it would never end. Finally, he stood up. "Where are you going?" Rode asked. "To find someone to help," Tony answered without hesitation. "There are so many gods, demons, or other things in this world. There must be one of them who knows whether he is dead or alive and where he is now. I'll go find them." He turned around and stalked in front of the conference room. "Listen, everyone, I don't know what you all think, but for me personally, if he is really dead..." He twisted his neck with a slight amplitude, blinking constantly. His expression was as ugly as if he had swallowed a whole fish. "I can't stand him being alone in some shitty place. Just thinking about that scene is enough to make me uncomfortable." Tony covered his stomach and leaned against the door. After a pause, he continued, "He has saved all of us many times, even the world many times. This is not the ending he deserves." He didn't finish his words, just put on his sunglasses and turned away. He didn't close the door, and his footsteps echoed in the corridor. Before the dust settled, no one really pronounced him dead. In the computer of the Shield Bureau that merged with the remaining Shield, the Avengers file about Shenyan was changed, and the status column was rewritten as missing. But in just one day, the news about him spread to many people. Even Frank, who was tracking a group of human traffickers in South America, called Tony on a local phone. His tone was not gentle, nor was his words elegant. It could even be said to be the exact opposite. In his few words full of swear words, with the gunshots in the background, Tony heard Frank say, "Listen, Tony Stark, I have always disliked you, but you have changed my mind recently. But you are still a bit stupid. How can you die? Please, you are smarter than us. Use your brain." Frank cursed angrily. "Don't you claim to be the smartest person in the world? Use your damn brain." "Damn it." Tony, who was inexplicably scolded, did not want to curse back. It was rare for Frank to be so angry. He has always been an icy person. Not to mention emotional excitement. Tony once saw him being stabbed in the knee with a knife and cut a circle, and he did not even change his face. More importantly, he was receiving a special guest. A guest who claimed to have met Shenyan, Black Panther, T'Challa. He was sitting in Tony's office, sitting in a relaxed posture. Tony looked at him with a complicated expression. Since the moment T'Challa walked into his office, Jarvis had warned him more than 13 times, including but not limited to detecting mechanical creatures disguised as humans, high-energy reactions, your life may be in danger, and so on. "What did you do to yourself, T'Challa?" Tony asked. T'Challa waved his hand calmly. "This is not what we are discussing today, Tony. What I did to myself has nothing to do with where I am now. If you really want to know, I can only tell you one thing." His face began to shed its skin, and the nanomachines that made up the lifelike bionic face began to fade away like the tide, along with the suit on his body. The flesh turned over, revealing the mechanical structure underneath. Finally, a man wearing a Black Panther suit and a steel face took his place and sat in the same place. Even the voice became a synthetic sound. "That's it, Tony," T'Challa said. "Anyway, I just came here to tell you that I met he 2 days ago. At that time, he was fighting some terrifying enemies. I don't know what they are, but they look not much different from the gods in my impression. Even if he turned into a machine." T'Challa still sounded humorous. "In the middle of the process, he asked me to leave to deal with the little monsters in Africa that were caused by excess magic. That's what he said. Although I still don't understand what excess magic is. But when everything was over, I saw a flash of white light from the surveillance in Wakanda." Tony raised his hand and pressed a few times on his desk. With a light beep, Strange walked out of the suddenly opened portal. His carefully trimmed and groomed beard was now messy, as was his hair, and his eyes were full of bloodshot. There was no doubt that he was working overtime with the time stone again. Tony didn't say anything. He was the same, working non-stop, and even for some specious traces, he broke his promise to his daughter to go to the amusement park. He gestured, picked up his coffee and walked aside, letting T'Challa explain to Strange himself. Standing in front of the window, he sipped the espresso in small sips. The heavy bitterness exploded on his tongue, making him feel a little relieved. "Come on, Tony," Strange called him from behind. Tony turned around and saw a new portal appear in his office. Without saying a word, he put down the coffee cup and walked in together. Behind the door was a vast wasteland. Jarvis said in his headset. A large amount of energy reaction was detected. "Sir, I'm afraid you need to put on the armor. These energies have a lot of radiation that is not good for the human body." Tony patted his chest as he was told, and the nano-armor was put on in just 1 second. Strange looked up at the sky, and the remaining complex magic aura made him frown. The remaining aura here was too complex. He distinguished the aura of Sidorak in the beholder Shumagorat. There was also a seemingly angelic aura. Of course, there were also traces of Shenyan's own magic. Strange raised his hands, and several magic circles with complicated patterns appeared in the air. The exhausted Supreme Sorcerer raised his trembling hands, and the magic circles began to slowly dissipate, turning into blue magic light in the air to outline several strange characters, and then quickly disappeared. Tony and T'Challa watched him cast the spell, and they could not provide any help. They could only wait for a result. A few minutes later, Strange lowered his head. "There are traces of teleportation spells here. Who used it?" Tony asked the key question sharply. Although he didn't know much about magic, in his opinion, tracing such things was similar to tracing the IP addresses of those who scolded him on the internet. The key is always to trace the source. "It's him." Strange smiled tiredly. "Wait a minute, I have to follow the breath and trace it back. This process will take several hours." He always habitually adds a counter detection after using a spell. "Although I can solve it, it will take some time. Then, I guess, there should be nothing for me to do next," T'Challa said, nodding to Tony. "If you need anything, you can find me over there." He pointed to the wasteland not far away, where a light blue barrier suddenly appeared on the empty land. Obviously, Wakanda was behind. "Although no one in the country needs food anymore, I still have a lot of arable land and animals." T'Challa turned around and walked over there, and the synthesized voice was full of something inaudible. "So, if you need food, contact me. This is all I can do. In addition, if a funeral is really necessary, I will notify you." Tony nodded to him. "Don't worry, T'Challa." Thor was wearing a pair of headphones, listening to the explosive alien band's songs and shaking his head. It must be said that although the races are different and the aesthetics are different, you can always find some similar tastes. For example, the song he was listening to, the song's title literally translates to "I want to stab you to death with a knife and marry you," from a band called Beat the Sea with a Stick. The name is quite strange, and Thor can't understand the lyrics, but the melody is not bad. It's refreshing, the rhythm is high, and he is very happy to listen to it. He shook his long hair, nodded, and stomped his feet on the ground. This look naturally makes people feel noisy, and Star-Lord looked at him unhappily and threw a controller over. "Don't listen." "What are you doing?" Thor instantly reached out and grabbed the controller, took off the headphones, and was not angry, but still smiled. Noisy notes, strong drums, and something like groaning came from the headphones. Star-Lord frowned painfully. He couldn't understand Thor's taste in music. It was too bad, too bad. What's so good about those heavy metal songs? It's better to listen to more lyrical ones. Just by looking at his expression, Thor knew what he wanted to say. Thor's expression was rare and serious. "Listen, Peter, everyone has different tastes. Heavy metal and most rock music are good to me, okay? I have a pass for them in my brain, and as long as I hear them, they will enter my memory. You understand? This is what I like. Although I don't understand the lyrics, I don't want to understand them. As long as it sounds fun, I like it. And those slow songs you listen to, although I don't like them, I won't say anything." "So, If you say anything about my music taste again, I will tell Gamora about you secretly eating junk food in the middle of the night." Star-Lord's eyes widened. "How do you know?" No, I didn't eat it." "Oh, then the things that are missing from the refrigerator are all eaten by me?" The two soon started arguing, and such quarrels happened many times a day. They were used to it and never tired of it. As for Gamora, she had no interest in engaging in such meaningless behavior with these two childish guys. The lady was reading a book in a small botanical garden in the center of the spaceship that was specially reserved for Groot. She was sitting on the grass, feeling very comfortable, until Shenyan arrived. "Hello, ma'am." He approached Gamora silently. The greeting was so sudden that she almost jumped up from the ground. Her right hand instinctively grabbed the knife at her waist. "Wow, there is no need to use the knife." Shenyan raised his eyebrows. "I just said hello to you." Gamora stood up and bit her lip, wanting to be angry but not daring to be angry. "You scared me." "Then I apologize." The wizard shrugged. "Besides, what I say next may scare you again. Well, do you want to meet your father?" Gamora's heart skipped 2 beats. There is another chapter. Chapter 655, Fun is Contagious. She wanted to say, "Didn't you kill my father?" Or, "Are you referring to my original father? Why should I see him? I haven't seen him many times. Why are you asking this?" 10,000 questions swirled in her mind, but in the end, only one word came out. "Ah," she said blankly. Shenyan tapped his forehead. Asking this question was just because he was bored, but he suddenly remembered that there was such a thing. In a certain universe, there was a mad titan who was thrown into Texas by him to be a farmer. That Thanos took a completely different life trajectory. Not to mention being crazy, the last time Shenyan checked on him, he had already entered politics. Don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to compensate you or feel guilty for killing your father. In fact, you and your sister should know best what kind of person he is. Of course. Gamora lowered her head with a complicated expression. Thanos, known as the Mad Titan, was merciless to the two of them. He trained them cruelly from childhood to adulthood, and the occasional warmth he showed was only fleeting. Most of the time, he was a cold, ruthless and extremely active madman. And this madman has been engaged in family planning in the universe for 100 years. In fact, I asked this question simply because I wanted to ask. Shenyan spread his hands sincerely and explained to her. "Please forgive me, just pretend that I didn't say anything, okay?" After saying that, he turned around and planned to leave. Gamora stood there, her cheeks twitching, and her heart was speechless. If she didn't dare to scold him, she would have scolded him out loud by now. What kind of person is this? Is he sick? Inexplicably, however, in front of her, the figure holding her hand and walking through the long corridor of the spaceship appeared. The body made a decision faster than the brain, I think. The wizard stopped and showed an expression on his face that he was going to watch the show. Invisibly, it merged with the smile that Scythorn was used to. "Mr. Thanos, 2 reporters want to interview you." "What TV station?" "CNN." Thanos raised his head. "Tell them to leave my office and be polite. By the way, Miss Aurora, any interviews with CNN TV station in the future can be turned down. Please also inform the gentlemen in the security room and ask them to keep a close eye on these people." "I understand, sir." The dark-skinned secretary quickly left the office, leaving Thanos and the other woman talking inside. "Excuse me, Miss Aurora is a top student at Yale University, but she is not very adapted to the environment as a secretary." Thanos showed an apologetic smile on his face. "What did you say just now?" The white-haired but still elegant lady wore a long dress made of expensive materials but outdated. Her wrinkled hands firmly grasped the faded strap of the handbag in her hands. Her expression was uneasy, but she still forced herself to be calm. "It's like this, my son-in-law." The old lady pursed her lips before continuing. "He had an affair and recently beat my pregnant daughter so hard that she had a miscarriage. My husband was furious and went to find him, but he beat her so hard that she had to be sent to the hospital. I have no choice, sir. I have no choice. He is a city policeman and he threatened me, but I dare not call the police. Please forgive me." The old lady took off her glasses and wiped her tears with the handkerchief in her pocket. "Please forgive my gaffe. Mr. Thanos. But I heard that you have the ability to seek justice for those who cannot make decisions for themselves. For God's sake, sir, please help me. Of course I will help you, Mrs. Hopkins. Anyone who hears about this will be angry. I am no exception. But I have two things I want to tell you. Thanos' expression gradually became serious. First, this matter has nothing to do with God's will, Mrs. Hopkins. It is your desire to seek justice for your daughter and husband that brought you to me. This has nothing to do with God, but you helped yourself. Think about it, Mrs. Hopkins. If this is really God's will, then your daughter's miscarriage and your husband's hospitalization are also part of his will. Regardless of Mrs. Hopkins' confused expression, Thanos continued. Second, how do you want me to get justice for you? He stood up and paced in the office. She raised her right hand and moved her wrist with a serious expression. I can find him, warn him, and keep him away from your family in my name. But this won't change anything. He will always retaliate, because for a person like him, losing face is more painful than losing his life. This is also a common point among domestic violence perpetrators. He stopped at his window, staring at the quiet neighborhood, his voice calm. So, if you really want justice for yourself, Mrs. Hopkins, it won't work on my own. You must act on your own. My lady, you must be brave. Don't rely on God, rely on yourself. Me? Mrs. Hopkins gripped the strap of her purse tighter. What can I do? Evidence, Mrs. Hopkins. Evidence. Thanos turned around and smiled gently. He is a domestic abuser and has committed 2 horrific crimes. You just need to go to the hospital and ask the doctor to issue you a certificate. If that doesn't work, the medical records can also prove it. He caused your daughter to have a miscarriage and beat your husband. These are all true. As long as you can get this kind of decisive evidence, I can use my power as the mayor to force the police system to pay attention to this matter. Besides, I don't believe that there are no good people among our police. Bastards like him are a minority after all. After spending more than 10 minutes to optimize the details for Mrs. Hopkins, Thanos sent her away. However, just as he let the old lady leave, his expression suddenly became gloomy. After returning to his desk, Thanos picked up the phone on the desk. Miss Aurora, it's me. Can you please ask Mr. Hank from the guard room to come over? Not long after, heavy footsteps sounded in the corridor in front of his office, and then the door was knocked rhythmically. Come in, Hank. A middle-aged man with Italian ancestry walked in with a solemn expression. You're looking for me, Mr. Thanos? Yes, please sit down, Hank. Thanos gestured. I have something to entrust to you. You go. Hank nodded crisply. Thanos didn't rush to speak, but opened the drawer and handed Hank a cigar. He knew Hank. This Italian mixed descendant whose name had nothing to do with Italians had no other hobbies, just cigars. After he accepted it, Thanos spoke. What's the progress of the plan we're working on with the police? In the past 3 months, we've arrested 17 juvenile drug dealers, and we've persuaded them severely. These 17 kids are now behaving well, and the street thieves are also much more obedient. The news from the police is that in half a month, we can announce that there will be no more drugs circulating in the school. Thanos smiled. Well done, but this is just the first step. Our ultimate goal is to arrest all those who make and sell drugs. This is our town. We can't let them endanger our children, right? Of course, sir. Hank nodded. Do you have anything else to do? Well, I want you to do me a favor. Thanos leaned back in his chair and sighed. There's a local Mrs. Hopkins. Do you know? Her son-in-law. Well, let's put it this way, Hank. I need you to go to the city, find this bastard and teach him a lesson. Hank's expression changed a little bit. Their town is not big, but not small either. 3 schools, and 2 shopping centers. But these things can't cover up the human touch that has been passed down in the town since ancient times. Mrs. Hopkins's family is quite popular in the local area, but their daughter's husband is a scumbag who often hooks up with questionable women in the bar and has fought with the bartender several times. Many people have long been dissatisfied with this bastard. If he didn't work in the city, I'm afraid someone would have crossed the line of words and had a physical conflict with him. Texans don't talk to you about so much nonsense. Police will be beaten up anyway. Just because you are a policeman doesn't mean you are not a scumbag. What did he do? Hank asked. He made Mrs. Hopkins' daughter miscarry, and then beat old Mr. Hopkins to the hospital, Thanos said simply. That's it. Are you willing to do me a favor? Hank's face slowly showed a creepy smile. He was a retired soldier who had been taking some bodyguard jobs in the local area before accepting a job in the mayor's office, but he didn't let go of the things he learned. Understood, sir. I'll go now. Goodbye, and good luck, Hank. Thank you, sir. Hank closed the door and left. Thanos sat on the chair and sighed. At the current speed, it would probably take him decades to enter the upper echelons of politics and change some things, but he had no choice. The extraordinary power he had as the Mad Titan had disappeared. At this moment, he was just an ordinary person who was a little strong and had some brains. He especially liked to meddle in other people's business. Revenge for Mrs. Jackson seemed to be the beginning, and what happened later made him even more uncontrollable. One day, he ran into two drug dealers trying to sell drugs and hallucinogens to children in front of a local high school. This made him furious. Thanos certainly knew what these things were, and he had seen too many similar things. Not to mention the Earthlings. Even aliens would become idiots who only knew how to seek pleasure if they got involved in this kind of thing. The more important point was that the targets of the drugs sold by those two bastards were children, or high school students who liked to pursue excitement. If they got involved in this kind of thing, their lives would be over. Thanos didn't want this to happen, so he meddled in other people's business once. That night, he meddled in other people's business for the second time when drug dealers came to his door, and then the third time, and the fourth time. When he came to his senses, Thanos had been on the local newspaper and became a well-known hero who single-handedly defeated the gangs in the neighborhood. At this time, he made up his mind. He would do it once and for all, forget it, and stop farming. It just so happened that the position of mayor was vacant, so he immediately ran for election and won the election with his influence. He has been in office for 2.5 years, and his reputation has risen. The people in the town are just simple, not stupid. They know which mayor does practical things and which mayor is cunning. Otherwise, Miss Aurora, a top student at Yale University, would not take the initiative to come to his office as a secretary. His thoughts were interrupted by the ringing of the phone. Thanos reached out to pick it up, and Aurora's voice rang inside. Sir, there is a lady outside who wants to see you. Madam? Do I know her? She said you should know her. Oh, by the way, she said her name is Gamora. Sir, are you still there? Thanos' eyes widened. 1 second passed, 2 seconds passed. He took a deep breath. Yes, I'm still here. Sorry, Aurora. My pen just fell under the table. Miss Gamora, right? Please let her in. He hung up the phone, stood up immediately, and began to pace around the office anxiously. How could she be here? Did they find me? No. If they find me, those heroes will not let me go. What is she doing here? Is she okay? Thanos took a deep breath to calm himself down. Footsteps were heard outside the corridor, and the gap between lifting and falling was exactly half a second, exactly the same, and extremely accurate. Yes, it was really her. This pace. The footsteps gradually approached, and someone knocked on the door. Thanos walked over and opened the door of the office himself. Standing in front of him was a woman with red hair and wheat-colored skin, no different from humans. But that face was very familiar to him. She looked at Thanos, who also looked like a human, and slowly smiled. Hello, Father. The former Mad Titan stared at her in a daze, and for a moment he didn't know what to say. It was not until Gamora raised her eyebrows and asked, "Aren't you going to invite me in?" that he came back to his senses. He hurriedly made way. Come in. Then he closed the door quietly, walked to the window and opened it. He had smoked here not long ago, and the smell of smoke still lingered. He didn't know if Gamora liked this smell, but it was better to let it go. Gamora looked at his actions and couldn't help laughing. You are really different, Father. Thanos stood by the window a little awkwardly, not daring to look back. He looked at the scenery outside, and the calmness that he felt like a fish in water completely disappeared, leaving only the most primitive and real tension of a father. He stood in front of the window and asked, "Are you okay, daughter?" "Okay. 6 chapters are finished. A total of 12,000 words. I'm running out of words because of the speed of typing. Let me talk about future updates. Probably this Sunday, the author will go to the detention center. Of course, he is not going to jail, but to work. It's 7 days a week. Work 7 days and rest 7 days. I don't know if I can bring a computer inside, but I plan to use my mobile phone to type. So from now on, I will update twice a day for 7 days, 4K words, and then 8K or 10,000 words a day on the 7 days of rest. That's about it. Chapter 656. Those words that could not be said. Thanos did not look back. He did not dare to, afraid to see a mocking smile or a disappointed expression, or an emotionless calm, and none of these were what he expected. After living as a real mortal for a period of time, the former Mad Titan had realized how serious a mistake he had made in the past. Because of this, he fully understood that his daughter had the right to hate him, even the right to kill him. Thanos' right hand stayed on the curtain, rubbing it nervously, turning a small area into a wrinkled shape. At this moment, Gamora's voice came from behind him. I'm doing well, Father. I met a good man. Although he is stupid and sometimes out of tune, he loves me with all his heart. I also have a group of friends. We roam in the universe and call ourselves the Guardians of the Galaxy. Occasionally, we will go to guest stars adventurers and explore some planets where no one exists. The income from this business is not bad, and I live a comfortable life. Listening to her voice and the relaxed tone, the first feeling that came to Thanos' mind was not relief or joy. Instead, it was an inexplicable anger. How could you have no hatred for me? The black curtains in front of him gradually turned into a chaotic color. Thanos lowered his head and smiled bitterly. Yes, what was more difficult for him to accept than hatred was actually Gamora's indifference. He put on a calm face and turned around. Really? That would be great. He swallowed the second half of the sentence before he could finish it. Gamora smiled and sat on the chair, 2 lines of crystal tears falling straight down. When they dripped to the ground, Thanos' heart ached without warning. He subconsciously took 2 steps forward and stretched out his hand to wipe away her tears. Thanos was startled suddenly, and some scenes in his memory emerged. He remembered that when Gamora was young, she would cry secretly after every training session because she couldn't bear it. Thanos would secretly bring her all kinds of desserts to eat, and then wipe the tears from her face. The child gradually overlapped with the woman in front of him, and his hand remained steady, but did not move again. Gamora did not hide, but his hand stopped in midair and was withdrawn on its own. Thanos looked away. So, you came to me. What's the matter? I don't know why I came to you, Father. Gamora said softly. Maybe I just want to see you. Maybe I want to kill you. I don't know, Father. I don't know whether I love you more or hate you more. You are a lunatic. You killed my mother and my compatriots. You took me to the cold and dark deep space and put me on the verge of death countless times. You made me what I am now. I can kill a dozen civilians with a wave of my fingers, but I don't want to be like this. Gamora raised her hand, which was slender and with distinct joints, but did not remind people of a pianist or an artist. On the contrary, those seemingly weak fingers gave people an unbearable sharpness. These hands could have been used for other things, but you let them kill people. I killed so many people for you, Dad, so many innocent people. I didn't want to kill them. Thanos' expression, like ice, finally melted, and his lips trembled, opening and closing, not knowing what to say. Say something. The daughter sobbed. That tone was weak. That was the emotion he would never allow her to show in the past. At this time, his daughter was repeating this sentence over and over again. Her tears turned into an ocean, shattered on the ground, and someone's heart was broken with it. Please, say something. What should I say? Apologize? Can an apology make up for the life you lost? I don't think it can, child. Looking at those eyes full of tears, Thanos finally said only a few words, pale and powerless. I'm sorry. Ding-ling-ling. The phone rang. Breaking this embarrassing scene, Thanos subconsciously reached out his hand and pressed the receiver. The ringing continued. After 3 seconds, he realized that he should answer the phone. He picked up the phone and heard Aurora's voice in the receiver. Sir, Mrs. Hopkins is in trouble. What? Thanos said it, and then he found that his voice was frighteningly hoarse. "She had a car accident on the way to the hospital. Mr. Hank passed by and found her. He called me and asked me to inform you." Car accident? Something familiar was slowly returning to Thanos' heart, and a certain intuition that made him extremely familiar was stabbing in his brain. Both sides of his temples were throbbing wildly, and his voice became a little hoarse. "Where is it?" Aurora's voice quickly brought him back to reality, and there was worry and fear in her voice. 3 blocks away. "I understand, Aurora, thank you. I plan to leave work early today. Please close the door for me." Thanos hung up the phone, and Gamora stood up. The time for father and daughter to talk has passed. After all, they can't confide in each other like ordinary people. Some things can only be kept in the stomach for a lifetime. Those that have been said out loud are actually enough. Gamora wiped her tears and smiled. "I remember you never apologized, father. I remember you never called me dad." Without saying more, Thanos picked up his coat and went out with Gamora. Hank was smoking. His cigarettes were all hand-rolled, made by himself. The tobacco that he paid for someone to bring back from the city had a long and mellow aroma, and the curling green smoke burned and rose into the sky. He leaned against his car with a gloomy expression. The sound of an ambulance came to his ears. The scene had been cordoned off. 2 young men were talking to the police who came with fear on their faces. They were witnesses. A body that had already lost its voice was lifted from the ground to a stretcher by 2 nurses in white clothes. In the distance, a man with a demented expression was being escorted into a police car. There were scattered blood stains on the ground, which looked like some kind of surrealist painting, but it began to make his stomach ache. He knew that this matter was probably not that simple, not to mention whether there would be such a coincidence in the world, and even if there was, he would go to the bastard to have a good talk. A policeman approached. The autumn in Texas was not hot, but it was not cold either. He was wearing a short-sleeved uniform, with a reliable .45 on his waist, and nodded at Hank. "Have you found out?" Hank smiled at him and put out the cigarette. The policeman's name was Daniel, and he and his wife were trying to get pregnant recently. This matter spread far and wide in the town. He quit smoking and drinking for this, and even changed his habit of not eating vegetables, just to have a good start. Hank didn't want his second-hand smoke to affect him. "I found out. He's from out of town, not a local. He was drunk and driving slowly in town. He sped up when he saw Mrs. Hopkins, and he didn't say anything when asked," Daniel said as he stepped forward, took off his police hat, and covered his badge with his hand. His expression became a little gloomy. "Come to the police station later. I'll check the surveillance." "Got it." Hank smiled at him again, but this time, there was something different in his smile. "There's one more chapter." Chapter 657, One More Secret. Thanos did not go directly to the scene of the accident. Hank was there, and he was very confident in Hank. He drove his own car, and Gamora sat in the passenger seat. The two were heading towards the center of the town. They had to pass the fountain and statue in the center of the town, turn left for 3 intersections, and arrive at a secluded community. That was Mrs. Hopkins's home. Gamora looked at the scenery outside the window, and there was something indescribable in her eyes. Thanos turned his head to look at her several times, wanting to say something, but when the words came to his lips, he still couldn't say them. 15 minutes later, they arrived at their destination. Mrs. Hopkins's home was a beautiful 3-story detached house with a neatly groomed lawn and a beautiful small tree. Thanos walked up to the porch, raised his hand and knocked on the door. A woman's voice that seemed to be weak came from the house. "Who is it?" "Is it you, Mom? You came back so quickly today. Didn't you say you were going to knit a sweater with Mrs. Holly next door?" The father and daughter looked at each other, and they both noticed something. Young Miss Hopkins was a smart woman, and it was obvious that she didn't talk too much because she was a chatterbox. Thanos coughed deliberately, then kicked the door open. The beautiful white wooden door was broken in half in an instant, and Gamora stepped into the house with the agility of a cheetah. A woman with purple cheeks and tear marks was looking at her in shock. At the back of the living room, stood a man with a bare upper body and a pistol in his hand. He had a bald head and a mustache, and his body was covered with tattoos. Gamora shook her right hand lightly, and a knife flashing with cold light appeared in her hand. She took another step forward naturally, with a graceful posture as if it was natural, and threw the knife accurately and swiftly. The man screamed, and the pistol fell to the ground, along with his 2 fingers. At this time, Thanos had just entered the door. He took a look at the situation in the house, took off his coat and put it on Ms. Hopkins, who was only wearing underwear, and then comforted her a few words, and asked her to change her shoes and wait outside the house. "Fuck, you crazy bitch. Damn, it hurts." Tears and snot flowed out, and he howled on the ground without any image. Thanos walked in slowly and stepped on the man's chest with his right foot. "Joe Williams, right? Who is this bastard?" "Damn, I'm a policeman. Policeman, you two are going to die, especially you, bitch. I'm going to stab your throat with a knife." Dirty words and anger were thrown out of his mouth. Joe Williams, who still didn't see the situation clearly, didn't know one thing. Thanos's right foot slowly exerted force, making it difficult for him to breathe, and then he couldn't say those dirty words anymore. "The bitch in your mouth is my daughter. No one can call her that, not even God. This is your most direct offense to me, Joe Williams. Second, I hate guys who only bully women and the elderly, and I also hate idiots. And you happen to be both." Thanos released his foot. Joe Williams was indeed an idiot, a scum and an idiot, but he is definitely a strong fool, a scum and an idiot. He got up from the ground, howling incoherently, and punched Thanos in the face. It was his scream that rang out again. Thanos retracted his fist expressionlessly, and Joe Williams knelt in front of him. He covered his right eye and screamed madly, like a wild animal. Blood gushed out from between his fingers. Bang! Thanos kicked him to the ground. Gamora watched all this quietly, and walked to the back of the living room to retrieve the throwing knife she had stuck in the wall. She didn't know what this strange father of hers would do, but she was very interested. Very interested. "Get up." Thanos looked down at Joe Williams almost mercilessly. "Your kneeling is meaningless to me. Don't you think you are very strong? Come and fight me." Joe Williams raised his left hand and waved it repeatedly. No, I won't fight anymore. Call the police, please. Don't fight. I did it. I will go to jail. Don't fight. Call the police." Thanos smiled. Joe Williams saw this smile with his only remaining left eye, and a chill rose from his tailbone. He couldn't help but tremble, and his voice became shrill. Yes. Call the police." "God, I plead guilty. I plead guilty. I recognize you. Aren't you the new mayor? Come on, I confess everything. I say everything. Arrest me. The law is for humans, Mr. Joe Williams. Or rather, it is for those who are still part of the human race and need to be recognized by society. Some of them are good and some are bad. Some have made mistakes, and some are born bad. But those are the ones who need the law." Thanos bent down and picked up the blood-stained pistol. He turned off the safety, unloaded the magazine, and carefully checked every part. At the same time, he said, "And you are a beast, a worthless scum. The law will not protect you, nor will it provide you with a so-called prison for you to go in and reflect." Joe Williams lay on the ground, using his hands and feet to crawl towards the door. The fear made him crazy. Escape, must escape, must escape. This man is a lunatic. He doesn't want to arrest me. He wants to kill me directly. If I die, I will have nothing. I just dealt with the old woman. The huge insurance money is about to come in. As long as I kill the woman who is in the way and the old guy lying in the hospital, I can take the money and run away. No, I can't die here. He crawled, leaving a long trail of blood and urine on the wooden floor. Just as he was about to reach the door and the hope of life, a woman's face full of hatred appeared in front of him. It was the face of his wife, a woman who had been beaten by him day and night for the past 2 years. At this time, there was no weakness on it, no fear of pain and his awe in the past. There was only hatred. She said nothing, but picked up an umbrella from the umbrella bucket at hand and poked him hard, trying to make him roll back into the house. Joe Williams was almost mad. "You dared to defy me? Dare to fight back? It seems that the lesson I taught you is not enough." He stretched out his hand, wanting to slap her hard as he did in the past, but suddenly found that he was lying on the ground. A sense of shock and humiliation surged in his heart. The bleak autumn wind at the door blew across his face, making him sober up a little. He immediately began to beg, "Please, Olivia, for the sake of the past, let me go." For the sake of the past? Olivia trembled and raised her umbrella, piercing his only remaining right eye. In the scream, she shouted heartbreakingly, "For the sake of the past, taste this, you fucking stinky bastard." Thanos winked, and Gamora immediately walked over and pulled the overly excited Olivia away. She comforted the poor lady and took her slowly to the car. Thanos dragged the screaming Joe Williams back into the house, put the gun to his ear, opened the safety, and loaded it. A few seconds later, gunshots rang out. The community was still quiet. No one called the police, and no one came out to ask what was going on. Many eyes were peeking at the house and the crying woman at the door from behind the windows. They kept this matter tacitly and did not mention it to anyone. The town will only have one more secret. There will be an extra update tomorrow to end the short Thanos chapter and wrap up Marvel. Chapter 658, Mage's Funeral. Hank arrived as promised. The police station was not big, and compared to the size of their town, it could even be said to be a little small, but it had everything you could need. Hank did not choose to go in, but lit a cigarette for himself at the back door of the police station. He had already sent a message to Daniel, and now all he had to do was wait. Not long after, the back door of the police station was pushed open. Daniel walked out with a gloomy expression. That bastard had a whole bottle of brandy in his car, and he drank every drop. He entered the town from the main road at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and after having a meal, he started wandering around the town. Damn, I think he was looking for someone. In other words, this was premeditated. I won't say that before the results of the investigation come out, but I can give you a low point, Hank. Daniel pointed to the back door. That bastard is being treated well by us inside. Hank nodded thoughtfully, and by the way, stood a little further away from Daniel, and put out the cigarette that he had just smoked for 2 puffs. I see. Thanks, Daniel. Come to Papa's bar tomorrow night. It's my treat. You should know that I've quit drinking, right? Papa's bar doesn't just sell alcohol. Hank smiled. Have you forgotten how delicious Papa's Russian food is? Remember, tomorrow night, no one will be waiting after the deadline. Do you have anything to do today? Daniel asked sharply. About that, Hank's ambiguous answer made Daniel's eyes light up. He nodded at Hank, turned around and opened the door, and said to Hank before entering the door, I won't ask you what you're going to do, but if it's what I want, you'd better do it harder. Hank watched him leave and returned to his car. He raised the window and then called Thanos. It's me, sir. Daniel just told me that the guy who drove a car and killed Mrs. Hopkins did it on purpose. On the other end of the phone, Thanos' voice was the same as always, but the sound of a shovel shoveling soil could be heard faintly in the background. Hank raised his eyebrows. Sir, it's okay, Hank. The plan to go to the city can be cancelled. Mr. Joe Williams plans to travel abroad. You can take a vacation. Do you need my help, sir? No, no. Thanos turned his head to look at Gamora, who was dragging a cylindrical object trapped in cloth from the car, tilted his head to clamp the phone, and shoveled up a piece of soil again. Take a good rest for a while, Hank. That's it, I'm hanging up. He inserted the shovel into the middle of the soil, smelled the special smell that can only be smelled after the ground is lifted, and put the phone away. In this era when everyone uses smartphones, he is still using an old-fashioned flip phone. Gamora dragged the thing over, waved it with one hand, and threw it accurately into the deep pit dug by Thanos, and then pulled Thanos out. His knees and trouser legs were covered with mud. Needless to say, Gamora wanted to reach out and take over the shovel in his hand to take over his work, but Thanos did not let go. You said you didn't want to. Thanos avoided her eyes. So I'll do it. Half an hour later, they returned to Thanos' car. Have you thought about where to go next? Thanos asked after taking a sip of water. Go back. Gamora looked out the window and said softly, for her, this was enough. Meeting a father who was completely strange but very familiar to her in a strange universe, such a journey made her feel satisfied. On the one hand, She didn't have to really struggle with whether to take revenge on him because he came from another universe. On the other hand, knowing that he did love her, this was enough. Shenyan did not choose to show up for him. Watching a show is watching a show. The part that only needs to be watched is enough, no more is needed. He also did not think he needed to intervene in the scene of the father-daughter reunion. Besides, this was just a small episode. It was just an unintentional act, just a small episode on the way home. If what he did helped Gamaro, it would naturally be great. Shenyan ignored Gamaro, who was feeling lost because of the separation from her father again. Shenyan knew that at this moment, Gamara needed peace and quiet more than being disturbed. After all, she could only truly open her heart when she knew that her father was from another universe, which actually said a lot. The short trip to the parallel universe reduced the time required for the journey home to just 3 hours. They had already entered the solar system, and they only needed to pass through the space toll booth set up on the edge of Jupiter to register and return to Earth. Thinking of this, he felt better. What Shenyan didn't know was that this long-lost relaxation would only last for 3 hours. Earth. The funeral was finally decided to be held in Kamartaj, where Shenyan had lived the longest and where he learned his skills. No one objected to this. However, there was no one who could appear as family members. Everyone was a guest. They were his friends and comrades in arms, but nothing else. Shenyan had no family. Strange was the first to go on stage. He didn't really care about the order, but everyone insisted that he go first, so he obeyed. Besides, Strange didn't think he had anything to say. What else could he say? Not long ago, he had just held a memorial service for the missing Wanda. Strange, who had spoken eloquently for more than 10 minutes, was now standing in the quaint courtyard of Kamartaj, but he couldn't say a word. The wind and snow blew over his shoulders, and the cold and magical air of Kamartaj made him shudder uncontrollably. Looking at the people sitting upright and solemnly in the audience, Strange finally spoke slowly. I don't know what I should say. I mean, what can I say? Introduce his life story like every funeral does? I don't think I need to do that. After all, you all know him. A fleeting smile appeared on Strange's face. Westerners like to use humor to deconstruct these serious occasions. Funerals don't have to be sad. They can also be relaxing. But he didn't plan to tell any jokes or anything like that. Rather than telling a sad story about his life and what he did, and then mourning for him for a long time, I think we should talk about him in everyone's eyes. Let's start with me. The audience saw Strange rub his eyes, and then he spoke slowly. There are still 2 chapters. I'm late. Sorry. Chapter 659, Mage's Funeral. I first met he here, yes, in this courtyard. He came 6 months earlier than me, but he has skipped the course of using the ring that many wizards have to spend about 3 years on. Of course, thanks to him, we don't need to use this thing now. For me, I didn't have a very good impression of him when I first met him. Ancient One asked him to study with me for a period of time, and you all know his character. Strange smiled helplessly. To be honest, I was almost tortured crazy by him during that time. Get up at 6 in the morning and study until 10. Then there is an hour of review time. Once it's 11 o'clock, my nightmare time is here. He will let me do 3 test papers, each of which is related to what I learned in the morning, and each must be full marks. If there is a question wrong, then start over. Banner and Tony in the audience looked at each other, and exchanged glances with lingering fear. This familiar strictness reminded them of their college days. Although the United States, which once existed, advocates happy education, as long as you go to college, you will know what it means to do homework until the early morning. I didn't even have time to eat. He even read ancient books and learned a spell called energy transfer for this purpose. After I finished the test paper, he would use this spell on me. The energy that was enough to support my daily consumption would be converted from magic power to various nutrients. The test paper was generally finished at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. In the evening, it was time for physical training. Yes, we Kamartaj mages need to exercise our physical fitness. There are even related martial arts training classes. He was a responsible teacher, but I just wanted to point at his nose and scold him. Now thinking back, I could sleep for 8 hours a day at that time. and my study was fulfilling and free. He was definitely a good and responsible teacher. He qualified me to use the hanging ring within 3 months. However, after saying so much, my first impression of him can actually be summarized in one sentence: an arrogant bastard who doesn't like to speak human language. It was a year later that I really changed my opinion of him. The flame ignited. Some people say that flames are the sign of the true birth of civilization. No matter how the first flame in the world was ignited, it always opened a new era. However, the person who said this may not have thought that fire can also be used to kill. Just like now, the ragged Strange gasped and pierced the body of a low-level evil ghost rushing towards him with a dagger made of fire. This kind of difficult little monster is usually born from the malice in the human heart. In other words, normal people cannot let these things be born in their hearts. Each of them is about 1.4 meters tall, with sharp teeth, dark skin, red pupils, and 2 twisted horns on the top of their heads, which looks extremely uncomfortable. He pushed the damn low-level evil ghost away with great effort. The little monster would disgust him even if it died, even if his heart was pierced by the flame dagger. The reaction force of it rushing straight forward also made Strange fall to the ground. This is not a good sign, you know. They are now in a monster nest. Fortunately, he did not come alone. There was an orange-yellow fire behind him, and a straight long knife suddenly cut through the air and even ignited the air. Magic poured out from the long sword, turning into a bridge in the air to build spells. Flames rose in the air, forcing back all the monsters that were surrounding him. Then, a hand pulled him up from the ground. It was rough and merciless, but Strange was extremely grateful. He wanted to say something, but the man who saved him just threw a sentence: "Don't get in the way." "Get in the way?" Exclamation mark. This comment made him stunned, and before he could refute, Strange saw the man waving a long sword and rushing into the darkness. The back was unstoppable, without any hesitation. Then, there was an explosion that resounded throughout the nest. The fire appeared again, but this time it was not as gentle as before. As we all know, spells can be affected by the mind. The curse spell cast with anger and the curse spell cast with peace of mind are two different concepts. Because of this, the explosion that just occurred in this dim monster nest shattered countless low-level evil spirits. Strange had curled up on the ground the moment the explosion occurred. He was not a fool and knew that he could not withstand such an explosion. There was no shelter nearby, so lying down to reduce the area of impact was obviously the best choice. However, the heat did not approach him. Strange raised his head carefully and saw Shenyan limping out of the darkness with a long knife, holding a baby in his arms, sleeping soundly. There were traces of magic on his body, and it was obvious that he was hypnotized by Shenyan. This was also a good thing. At least the child did not have to see the bloody scene around him. Seeing that he was fine, Strange breathed a sigh of relief, and seeing the child made him overjoyed. They came here for this child. Due to the overactive magic at the foot of Kamartaj, the simple villagers often encountered inexplicable things. It was common to encounter ghosts on the road at night, but the low-level evil ghost stealing children that they dealt with was still a big deal. Although they only stole one, and although they have not yet become powerful, low-level evil ghosts steal children not to eat, but to raise them. This child was carefully selected from countless babies and has excellent magical sensitivity. Those little evil ghosts can feel this, and they stole her back to infect the child's heart with malice, so that she will naturally become a big evil ghost. By then, it will not be a simple, low-level incident that can be handled by two apprentices. Big evil ghosts can even do things like calling the wind and rain for them. Calling heavy rain and urging landslides to kill humans are instincts engraved deep in their blood. "Are you okay?" Strange came forward and wanted to help Shenyan, but he did not agree, but handed the child to Strange, and then he fell down with a sway. At this time, Strange realized that he was not unscathed. There was a huge hole behind Shenyan, and the flesh and blood disappeared abruptly, and even the bloody spine and internal organs could be seen. Later I learned that at that time, with his level, he couldn't use such a violent explosion at once. As a price, he used part of his flesh and blood as a sacrifice. At this point, Strange paused. From that time on, I realized that this person might not have a likable personality, but he definitely deserves my respect. In the following 10 years, everything that happened has verified my opinion." He walked off the stage, unwilling to say more. The second person to come on stage was Tony. Chapter 660, Mage's Funeral. Strange's narration is as unremarkable as he is. Tony, wearing sunglasses, showed his talent as soon as he came on stage. This never-fading eloquence made Strange and the audience laugh helplessly. "But I'm different, gentlemen and ladies. I will tell you a heart-wrenching and wonderful story. In order to commemorate the common hero of mankind, in order to remember everything he has done for us, and I believe that his journey will not end here." After the initial gags, Tony's expression was extremely serious. People say that true death means that no one will remember it anymore. From this perspective, I believe that he is immortal. Without staying in the opening for too long, Tony quickly entered the story. In his story, Shenyan, who recklessly saved the baby with his own flesh and blood, showed another side. "Kill me, please, kill me." A woman wailed like crazy. She was tied to a cross, her body twitching constantly. The part where the skin touched the cross hissed, and the flesh was twisted and deformed by the heat. Shenyan stood in front of her with a serious expression, and Tony, who was wearing a suit, stood beside him with a twitching face. Looking at this scene, people who don't know the situation might think that the two of them are psychopaths who enjoy torturing people, but in fact, they are thinking about a solution. To be more precise, only Shenyan was thinking. Tony was just standing there, and he felt that he couldn't retreat. After a while, Shenyan sighed. "What's wrong?" Tony asked. "Her soul has completely merged with the evil spirit that is bound in her body." Shenyan explained simply. "There is no way to remove the influence. From now on, she will have to live under the influence of that evil spirit." "Why did you tie her to the cross?" "Things related to Christian beliefs can suppress the activity of things like evil spirits. I need her own will to be the dominant one, not the evil spirit." "But she looks very painful." Tony looked at the woman who kept wailing, took a step back, and said this with gritted teeth. "Of course she was in pain," Shenyan said softly. "It's not just pain. Humans who are forced to merge with evil spirits will suffer unprecedented mental pain. They will be dragged into illusions by evil spirits over and over again, and suffer horrible torture and illusions in them. Before we found her, she had been tortured by evil spirits for 3 days. She didn't collapse, which means she was determined, but being tied to the cross is not painful for her now. Physical pain can alleviate the mental influence from evil spirits. She asked me to kill her because she didn't want to be dragged into the illusion and tortured again, that's all." Tony felt dry mouth and cold hands and feet. Although Shenyan's narration was emotionless, he was a very delicate and sensitive person. Such people often have rich imaginations. In other words, Tony can easily scare himself. The scene described by the wizard made him unable to help but bring it into his mind. Then, he was scared. Tony Stark could face the threats of terrorists with his physical body without changing his expression, and he could fall vertically from a height of tens of thousands of meters in his armor. But that was the field he was familiar with, the field of technology. But now he was exposed to a completely unfamiliar world. "So, what should we do?" he asked. "Is there any way to help her?" Facing Tony's question, Shenyan just shook his head. "Killing her is the best help for her." He said this sentence without any emotion. "In fact, Tony, I am planning to do so." "What?" Tony stepped in front of him and the woman tied to the cross, waving his hands repeatedly. "No, number. There must be other ways, right? Killing her is too cruel." "It's not cruel, Tony." Shenyan stood quietly in place, with some emotions in his eyes that Tony couldn't understand. At the same time, the woman they rescued from the cult sacrifice site had gradually lost her voice, as if she had fallen asleep. "You don't understand," the wizard whispered. "For her, death is a relief. She can no longer live as a human being. Even if I can solve the entanglement between her soul and the evil spirit, she will live with those horrible memories for the rest of her life. Every night, she wakes up. As time goes by, she will even lose the ability to speak, because the pain exceeds the threshold that humans should bear." "Tony, there are some things that humans should not touch." Shenyan gently pushed him away and came to the woman tied to the cross. At this time, she happened to open her eyes. The brown eyes were numb, and a low moan came from her throat. It was not that she didn't want to scream, but that she had no strength. A slight breeze flashed through the room, and Tony couldn't help but squint his eyes. When he opened his eyes again, Shenyan had already held the woman in his arms. The blood on her body stained his black robe. Shenyan looked into her eyes calmly without saying a word. "I will kill you." After a long silence, Shenyan said softly. The corner of the woman's lipless mouth twitched, as if she was smiling. She raised her hand tremblingly and reluctantly placed it on Shenyan's right cheek. A slight flick left a blood mark. Tony heard a slight whimper, and he took a step forward, his fingers trembling constantly. The woman made a sound of inhalation from her throat, and then her eyes brightened a little. Thank you, thank you." Her body that was not a human form was trembling, and the evil spirit was wandering in her body. It had already sensed the arrival of something, and was now madly rushing in the woman's body, wanting to leave this body and find the next host. However, a hand pressed on the woman's forehead, stopping its movement. It also stopped the woman's pain. Her body no longer trembled because of the pain, and the blood stains all over her body also disappeared. The scars on her body began to heal quickly, and the disappeared lips reappeared. She no longer screamed, and she was no longer in pain. The rest was only calm. "This time," she said in a clearly audible voice, "thank you, sir, thank you." That was the first lesson I learned from him. I used to be very stubborn, always wanting to take everything on myself, because I think if you have the ability to do it but don't do it, it's no different from a crime. But even he couldn't save a woman's life, so what was I obsessed with? Tony spread his hands. After many years, I still remember the scene. He finally buried the poor woman in the cemetery as a normal death. He couldn't save her, but he gave her dignity. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelist. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 661, Mage's Funeral. Tony's story was not as exciting as he thought. What I mean is, the reaction of the audience was not as enthusiastic as he expected, and silence was the majority. He even saw the Green Banner's face showing regret, complexity and other mixed emotions. "It seems that I messed up." Tony shrugged and adjusted the microphone in front of him. "So, who is next?" "There is still a long time. Let me do it." Dr. Banner stood up, green, strong, with calm and deep eyes. That was not the look that Hulk should have. In the past, Hulk's eyes were only childish anger and mania. He was like a deceived child, and anyone who saw those eyes would know. And now, Hulk was gone. Only Banner, wearing special leather shoes. He walked up to the stage step by step, exchanged glances with Tony, and then stood in front of the stage instead of him. Banner coughed and then slowly spoke. "There are two people in every mirror. One of them, you can see, but the other one is the one you don't want to see. For me, Hulk was once the one I didn't want to see. I think everyone here probably doesn't want to see him." Banner laughed at himself. Since 2003, the big green guy has started to appear irregularly around the world. Some people call him the Devil's Engine and say that I am the messenger of hell. Well, I hold the opposite attitude. After all, according to the investigation, although I destroyed many houses at that time, I never killed any innocent people. The psychiatrist said that this is because Bruce Banner's subconscious is protecting his bottom line and trying to stop Hulk from killing innocent people. But sometimes, it's not. Dr. Banner lowered his head. "Sometimes I'm not there." Dash. Hulk. Smash. The 7-meter-tall strong monster jumped high, with incomparable anger in his eyes, and then jumped down, knocking over the huge robot in front of him with a violent force. He did not stop, and Hulk never knew what it meant to stop. He just added one more punch, and then another, attacking the chest of the thing endlessly. Its hard alloy shell finally couldn't withstand Hulk's attack, and was finally punched through. Metal parts mixed with oil and culture fluid surged out from the back of the hole. Electric currents kept bouncing at the joints of the robot, and it twitched constantly. The two thermal cannons on its shoulders that were powerful enough to destroy small towns began to warm up involuntarily. But Hulk didn't notice this at all. He just retracted his fists and raised his hands high. Hulk, he howled inarticulately, and even a deaf person could feel the anger in his voice. Smash! With a loud noise, the robot stopped moving completely, but the two thermal cannons on its shoulders were not like this. They began to emit a dangerous buzzing sound, and Hulk looked at them in confusion. Then, a hand patted his shoulder. The buzzing sound stopped. "Remember me, Hulk?" Shenyan, who was floating behind him, asked. Hulk looked at him in confusion. Hulk remembers the wizard. The wizard is a friend, and the wizard will not hurt Hulk. "Oh, I didn't think of that. Thank you for considering me as a friend, Hulk, but you have to stay away from this thing a little bit," Shenyan explained to him patiently, as if he was talking to a child. Why? Hulk hates the iron shell, but the iron shell can't hurt Hulk. This made him furious. Hulk smashed the iron shell. "Yes, Hulk, you smashed it, but it's not just an iron shell. Do you see the transparent tissue fluid on the ground?" Hulk looked back. He didn't know what tissue fluid was, but he felt that the word was familiar and scary. When he turned around, he couldn't help but be stunned. Large pools of tissue fluid began to flow out of the ground, mixed with scarlet, and the sticky substance was still warm, steaming in the winter wilderness of Minnesota. From the huge hole in the machine's body, Hulk was able to glimpse a still trembling brain. It was placed inside, like a funny special effect from an old horror movie, which made people feel absurd. But the fact is, it is really inside. Brain. Hulk stepped back like a frightened child, screaming. The brain is inside the iron shell. As the big man panicked, a hand gently patted his forehead, forcing him to calm down. Hulk rolled his eyes up and saw Shenyan's face, smiling. "Don't be afraid, Hulk. That brain is not a monster in a horror movie. I know you can see Dr. Banner's memory. He watched a similar horror movie when he was a child and was scared, right?" Hulk turned around and muttered, "Banner is stupid. Banner is timid. He is afraid of the brain. It's okay. It belongs to a man's brain named Cole Dickerson. He is a veteran. 2 years ago, he ran into you and government agents who were chasing you while traveling with his wife and children. They were ruthless and accidentally killed Cole Dickerson's family in the process of capturing you. But Dickerson was not at the scene at the time. He went to buy ice cream for his children. When he came back, he saw a group of government agents and the bodies of his wife and children covered with black cloth. They were smashed to pieces by a car. We all know that there is no difference between being hit by a car and being beaten by the Hulk, right?" Hulk lowered his head and sat there quietly. This was unusual because this guy had never been quiet. After a while, he whispered like a child who had made a mistake. "Hulk didn't hit them. Hulk doesn't hit good people." Yes, Hulk doesn't hit good people, but Dick Rosen didn't know, so he was deceived by lies and voluntarily joined this special experimental plan. Alas, the US government always has special experiments and special departments of this kind, which is really stupid. Anyway, Dick Rosen became like this 2 years later. Hulk finally raised his head. He wanted to hurt Hulk because he thought Hulk hurt his family? That's right. But Hulk didn't. "I believe you didn't, and I know you didn't." The big green child raised his hand to cover his head, trembling with regret. After a while, his green strong body gradually faded. A thin man took his place, curled up in the cold wilderness and shivered. Who is there?" Shenyan considerately conjured him a pair of glasses that matched his eye readings and handed them over, and then clothes that could withstand the cold. He turned around and took Dick Rosen's still trembling brain out of the machine while Banner was getting dressed. The mental tentacles performed this difficult operation perfectly, and then he protected it with magic aura, intending to reshape Dick Rosen's body in a while. He was already able to do this. "Is it you?" "It's me, Dr. Banner. I have to remind you that electronic products are sometimes not a good thing. Although there are indeed not many people in the wilderness of Minnesota, they can still find you." Banner lowered his head in regret. "No one was hurt?" "No. You picked a good place for yourself." Banner let out a long breath. "Then I'm relieved." "What is this robot? Has the US government updated their technology to this point?" "I know nothing about technology, Doctor." Shenyan smiled, fell to the ground, and stood shoulder to shoulder with Banner. The cold winter night in Minnesota is slowly getting brighter, and the sun rises a little bit from the far end of the horizon, emitting its warmth. Banner took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. He didn't understand why it was always like this. He knew he was a monster, so he lived alone, didn't want anyone to be hurt by him, didn't want to have anything to do with anyone. But there were always people coming to him, there were always people hoping that he would turn into the Hulk, and then smash things and destroy everyone's peaceful life. Maybe I should die, Banner thought. Tell me, Doctor, Shenyan suddenly spoke. Were you alone when you regained your sanity before? Yeah, sometimes I didn't even have a pair of pants, and I had to run naked on the road, looking for a kind person, or at least someone who wouldn't treat me as a pervert, and beg them to give me a pair of pants. Sometimes I also steal. Ha, who would believe that I used to be a top scientist? So, Shenyan turned his head and put his hand on his shoulder. Not this time, Doctor, at least this time. You are not alone when the sun rises. I'm done. The Green Doctor. Banner nodded calmly to the audience. That's it, no more stories. I really want to thank because he made me accept myself, and he also told me that I don't have to bear everything on myself. It's hard to imagine that he can be so gentle. Tony commented in the audience. I almost never do that in my impression. Maybe it's because there is no need to do that to you, Tony. You are an asshole. Rod on the side said this without hesitation, and even said the next sentence, and, to be honest, Tony, your story is wonderful, but the way you tell it is really terrible. You don't know how to tell a story at all. Are you serious, Rod? Why don't you go up and tell it? Do you think this is an easy thing? I'll go if I go. You go. The two of them were arguing with each other in a low voice, but were broken by a roar from the sky. A huge air current pressed down, and some huge object blocked the light from the sun. A spaceship slowly appeared in their sight. What? Spaceship? Wait, that ship looks familiar. Clint expressed his opinion, and then, with his excellent eyesight, he saw two people jumping off the spaceship. Ha 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 ha. Friends, you are all here. How can you not invite me, Thor, to a party? Thor, wearing a leather jacket, laughed loudly, landed on the ground, walked forward, and gave everyone he saw a warm hug. The tall man in a black robe beside him was not as happy as him. Of course, maybe it was because he carefully observed the layout of this party. Everyone stood up. Before all of you run towards me. The man raised his right hand. Can you explain to me why my photo is hanging there, and only half of my face? This is your funeral, Strange said unnaturally. Funerals have to have photos, right? Shenyan's expression finally became distorted. Ha 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 ha. Zythorn laughed until he was out of breath. This was not an exaggerated metaphor, but the truth. He had been laughing since the funeral, but at that time it was just a smile, full of expectations and other things. But when the spaceship appeared over Kamartaj, the smile on his face suddenly became wild. This expression, I will treasure it forever. Ah, Ancient One, you died too early, otherwise I really want to show you his expression. Zythorn squirmed at his chair, and his posture was completely lacking in the pride of being a dimensional demon. He was even about to roll off the chair, and his laughter echoed in the dark dimension, without stopping for a moment, and tears came out of his laughter. Are you laughing happily? The dark-faced wizard tore open the dimensional barrier with a fierce momentum and drilled in. Zythorn's laughter was choked, and he moved his fingers slightly, and the dark power that was enough to destroy the world was pulled onto the wizard's face to cover his vision. The god of the underworld was shocked in his heart. How did he come so fast? Forget it. Let's get ready quickly. Zysong began to block his sense of pain, then stretched out his hand and caught a dozen chaos fish outside the dimension. This thing that can destroy the planet is similar to an anesthetic to him. The poison can temporarily paralyze his soul so that he can't feel the pain in his soul later. However, just when his hand was about to put the fish into his mouth, Shenyan had already arrived in front of him. The expressionless look made him sweat on his forehead. After hesitating for a while, Zysong showed a harmless smile. If, I say, I didn't mean it, would you believe it? Shenyan pointed to his face. What do you think? I don't think you will, Zisong said honestly. He tried his best to stay calm, but the twitching corners of his mouth still betrayed him. The contrast between Shenyan's current expression and the expression he just saw was too strong. Finally, Zisong couldn't stand it anymore. He thought, even if I get beaten to death here today, I have to laugh out loud. Puff. Shenyan's face twitched and his right hand clenched violently. I really underestimated your limit, Zythorn. The wizard raised his fist gloomily. Tell me, have you ever been beaten by the power of a star explosion? No. But I can try. Ha 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 ha. Aziron answered with wild laughter. Chapter 662. There are statues of you all over the world. Sitting opposite Shenyan, Strange didn't dare to speak for a while. The horse-faced wizard was somewhat upset. How could he not know that he was fooled by Zythorn? Holding a funeral for a living person is somewhat black humor. Fortunately, Shenyan didn't blame him. Perhaps he was venting his anger. The wizard's expression was relatively calm now. Glancing at Strange, who was fidgeting, he sighed. Don't act like you've done something wrong. Can I blame you for anything? Just be more careful with Zythorn. You can only believe half of what he says. That bastard is only reliable a few times, and most of the time he is a hopeless idiot. Sighing, Shenyan stood up. He didn't forget his promise, and there were still two things he hadn't done. He pulled off the necklace on his neck, and the red gem reflected the light. A sleeping woman's face was reflected in it, and Shenyan threw it up lightly. The chain of the necklace automatically fell off and turned into an exquisite long table. The gem slowly fell and was placed on it. What is this? Strange frowned. Wanda? About the same. Shenyan gave an ambiguous answer. He narrowed his eyes slightly, and the gem began to emit light. The mental tentacles strongly isolated the influence that the gem might exert on reality. A huge amount of magic power surged out of the void. In just a moment, after the light flashed, Wanda lay on the wide long table, frowning, as if in pain. Then, he raised his hand and stroked Wanda's forehead. Strange faintly heard a scream full of resentment, and then Wanda's frown relaxed. That's it. The power of death is really convenient. Shenyan smiled inexplicably, opened the portal to Kamartaj, and wanted to leave directly. Strange quickly stopped him. Where are you going? Send the Lady Karazarel, who is stranded in our world, home. What else? Wait, you are leaving again? Facing Shenyan's puzzled eyes, Strange spread his hands. Kamartaj is just starting over now. Don't you plan to stay and be a teacher for a while? No, Shenyan smiled. I still have things to do. Junior brother, a promise is a promise. I still have a whole universe to save. It's a burning galaxy. Let's talk about it when I come back. After all, he lowered his head, and a blue gem appeared in his hand, and there seemed to be seawater shaking inside. It will take a long time for me to find the answer. Taking a Kryptonian to cross the border is an unprecedented experience in terms of physical strength. Kara, a lively girl, is stronger than Angren and her spirit. No, it's better to say willpower. That willpower is even more exaggerated, and she can even ignore the impact of the magnificent scenery of the endless sea of stars, maintain herself, and not feel dizzy. There is no place to reason about this matter, and even if you tell it to others, no one will believe it. How could a big guy with muscles and a murderous look be weaker than Kara, who is only about 1.75 meters tall? But the fact is, Kryptonians are really fucking outrageous. Woo-oo. With her golden hair flying, Kara's face showed nothing but excitement. She tightly grasped the sleeve of the wizard and screamed with joy in the endless sea of stars. Shenyan even had to use magic to construct a protective shield to isolate her voice, lest the cheerful mood attract some terrifying creatures that exist here and feed on happiness. This is so exciting. Oh my god. Clark will never believe it. No one will believe it, she shouted. Have you always been able to see such beautiful scenery? Not always. Shenyan smiled helplessly. He couldn't be angry with this simple girl, so he had to explain patiently. It's only been a short time since I was able to cross the boundary. In fact, I know very little about this place. But you are still amazing. The Kryptonian girl blushed. You are the only one I know who can do this. You are the first one among us to cross the boundary, just like the first person to go into space. What's his name? Yuri Gagarin? Yes, Yuri Gagarin. Shenyan's smile was also more sincere. Amazing man. This exciting journey did not last long. They soon entered the world barrier. When the familiar scene appeared in front of Kara again, she fell silent. Homesickness is not just a saying, but a feeling that everyone will have. They landed on the top of the Metropolis Daily Planet, where Clark Kent works, and today is Monday. He has no reason not to go to work. Well, goodbye, Kara. Wait a minute. The Kryptonian girl reached out and grabbed his sleeve, her eyes anxious. You don't want to see your own statue? I just went through my own funeral. Kara, looking at those blue eyes, he smiled and wanted to refuse directly, but Clark Kent's voice had already appeared. Kara, God, I thought I heard the heartbeat. Strongly he rushed over and gave Kara a heavy hug. After a while, they changed to a decent place to talk. The wizard wanted to leave directly, but in the end he couldn't resist the impulse in his heart. I mean, who doesn't want to see their own statue? At least Shenyan couldn't resist this temptation. He kept hypnotizing himself in his heart. I just don't want to disappoint their kindness. It's definitely not because I want to see it. When a lie is repeated 100 times, it becomes true. At this moment, they are sitting in a cafe near the Daily Planet. It was 10 o'clock on Monday morning, and there were not many people here. It will not be lively until 12 o'clock. Many people who don't bring lunch will choose to come to the cafe to eat simple sandwiches. Clark was obviously a regular customer here. He took a sip of coffee and smiled sincerely with gratitude. I really don't know how to thank you, Mr. He. There are only Kara and I left on Krypton now. I can't afford to lose her. What's more, you saved us all before. Ah, yes. The wizard raised his hand unnaturally and scratched his cheek. He rarely did this, but every time he faced such a person who did not hide his feelings and faced everything sincerely, he found it difficult to deal with. Shenyan coughed, took a sip of coffee, and hid his expression. Speaking of which, I heard that you built a statue for me. More than one. What? More than one, Mr. He. Under Batman's repeated requests, John entered his brain. He saw the whole picture, and thus understood what great things you did. So, we reported the whole thing to the United Nations, and now there is not only your statue in the Justice League Hall. Clark Kent waved his hand fiercely. There are statues all over the world, in major cities. Shenyan closed his eyes, and for the first time he had the urge to abandon everything and run away at the speed of light. He asked weakly, in other words, now everyone in the world knows who I am? Yes. After receiving Clark Kent's happy and affirmative answer, Shenyan closed his eyes in despair. The internet after the millennium is a chaotic place, where people use their creativity, and countless new things are born every day. Because of this, he could almost imagine what kind of discussion would be stirred up on the internet about himself, a little-known person who suddenly appeared to save the world and was endorsed by the Justice League and the United Nations. Putting aside the fan fiction and fan art that might be flying all over the place, he might suddenly receive a large amount of faith power after a period of time. For a wizard, this is not a good thing. Are you unhappy? Clark asked cautiously. Kara, who was browsing her phone at the side, also blinked. No, I'm not unhappy. I'm just a little shocked. That's all. There is one more chapter, and a new volume will be opened to return to Warhammer. Chapter 663. You can't rest yet, Gilliman. For the Emperor's sake. Gilliman threw the document and his hand on the table and questioned the man sitting opposite him angrily. Frank, what are you doing? What did I do again? Frank frowned. You said to take back the ship. I took it back. What's the problem? Gilliman's face twitched. That was a new ship that just rolled off the production line 3 years ago. Gilliman's voice seemed to be squeezed out from between his teeth. The technology on it is all new, and you smashed most of its facilities to pieces. That's not my problem. You have to reflect on yourself, Gilliman. Frank remained calm. If I remember correctly, it was you who asked this ship to go to that place to transport supplies. It's not my problem that it was taken away by the orcs. You are not unaware of how difficult those greenskins are. In fact, most of the destruction of the facilities was not done by me. After a long silence, Gilliman sighed. What else could he say? Frank always gave powerful answers and reasons, and always did things that made his blood pressure rise, but he could do nothing about it. For example, last time, he asked Frank to investigate a planetary governor suspected of corruption, but he didn't even carry out the investigation procedure. After arriving at the place, Frank spent half a night burning half of the city where the governor lived to ashes. When he came back to report on the mission, Gilliman suppressed his anger and asked him why he did it, and Frank's answer was, he was corrupted. Where's the evidence? My intuition. Your intuition? Can your intuition serve as evidence? Do you know how much trouble it is to rashly kill a planetary governor? Even for me, I have to sign hundreds of orders before I can kill him. Gilliman wanted to shout this sentence at the time, but he didn't, because his intuition told him that Frank was right. Ironic, right? The subsequent investigation also proved this. Under the city, there is a hidden Slanesh sect. Thinking of this, Gilliman decided not to argue with Frank anymore. It was meaningless. He had more important things to do. Okay, you can rest for a month, or 2 months. The Imperial Regent waved his right hand weakly. Go to the space station and relax for a while. The war on the front line does not need you to fight for the time being. Steve is enough there. No, Frank rarely became serious. He stood up, put his hands on Gilliman's desk, and said solemnly, you have to give me a new mission. I don't care who I kill. Traitors, demons, ribs, aliens, those greenskins are fine. I want a mission. No mission. Gilliman slammed the table. No, there is no mission for you. Emperor, do you know how much paperwork I have to do for you every time for after-sales service? If you don't want to rest, you have to let me rest. Frank frowned disapprovingly. How lazy. Gilliman was almost angry to death. Slack me? How can you rest? Frank looked at Gilliman seriously, his eyes full of dissatisfaction. I understand that the Empire is gradually getting on the right track now, and it's normal for you to feel that you can be lazy for a while. After all, new ships and new weapons, as well as our giant space stations connecting the planets, these things are enough to change the ecology of our world in the galaxy. I understand, but you can't think that's enough. Gilliman, you have to keep working. Just like me, there are endless monsters to kill, just like your paperwork. They are endless. For the human world, we are too small, and that's why we have to work non-stop. Gilliman had to admit one thing. If he didn't know that Frank, this bastard, just wanted to go out and kill something, he would have been really intimidated by him. But this is where the Punisher's brilliance lies. He didn't say a single lie. All of it was the truth from the heart. Gilliman had a breath of anger stuck in his neck and didn't know how to spit it out. He bared his teeth, and his expression was slowly moving closer to anger. Come tomorrow, I'll give you a new mission, the Regent said gloomily. Now, get out of my office. Frank shrugged. No problem, Your Highness the Regent. Inquisitor Bonavia, whose half-face was replaced by nanomachines, was looking at Frank with a strange expression. When the battle named the rebirth and destruction of Terra began, she was attacked on the glory of Macragge. When she woke up, the Emperor was alive, the Empire was saved, and the Inquisition was gone. Regardless of what Bonavia thought at the time, she really liked her nanomachine face. After the Emperor woke up, the state church silently changed its propaganda. From the supremacy of theology to technology is the gospel of the Emperor. We should vigorously develop it and must not bring shame to him. Although Bonavia didn't know why technology could suddenly develop, this half of the nanomachine face and a right hand brought supreme convenience to her work. Excuse me, Frank. She called Frank by his name without any honorific. Did you really say that to the Regent? Is there anything wrong? Nothing is wrong. Okay. Bonavia was furious in her heart, but her face remained calm. You said he was lazy, but that's a bit too much. He was lazy. Admit it, Bonavia. Sitting on her ship, Frank knocked on the bulkhead unhappily, causing an echo. The number of missions I received this year has more than doubled compared to last year, and they are all troublesome tracking missions. Humphrey, although killing those monsters is not bad, there are still many planets in the Empire that need my rescue. Rescue? Bonavia's eyes became even weirder, and she thought for a while before accepting this description. Putting aside Frank's behavior of killing without burying, He is indeed rescuing innocent people on those planets. After all, gangsters and corrupt elements do deserve to die. Okay, Master Frank. The female judge sighed again. No matter who talks to Frank, they will sigh frequently. Are we going to the space station above Terra? Your ship needs repairs. Doesn't Gilliman have repair equipment on his ship? Your ship is new, Master. Besides, I need repairs too. Bonavia pointed to her face. That special doctor asked me to go back for a checkup every 2 years. In the end, Frank compromised. Then go. Computer, change the destination to Terra Space Station. Received. The destination has been changed to Terra Space Station. In this situation, I can't help but want to sing a few words. The spring breeze of reform is blowing everywhere, and the people of the Empire are really working hard. The new space station is just the first step. I also plan to do something else. Chapter 664 Special Doctor. The Terra Space Station is a new building. Compared with Terra, it is too young, but its size is not. The huge silver metal ring tightly wraps Terra, as if it is her orbit. No matter how many times she looks at it, Bonavia will be distracted by it. We are about to dock with the space station. Please be prepared. Shaking is expected. Please activate the magnetic boots or fix yourself to the seat. The main control computer of the spacecraft reminded the two with a gentle synthetic voice. Bonavia immediately pressed a green button on the seat belt and fixed herself to the seat. Frank ignored the reminder of the main control computer at all. He was leisurely playing with a combat dagger in his hand. Apart from weapons and equipment, he has no other hobbies. This is a reward after a mission. It is the latest scientific and technological achievement with 3 optional modes. The first is the normal mode. There is nothing to say, except that it is extremely sharp and strong. The second mode, high-frequency vibration blade, is used to deal with armored enemies. The third mode, high-temperature mode, can cause devastating blows to enemies who rely on their physical strength. Through the built-in pattern array, this combat dagger in high-temperature mode can even melt ceramic steel directly, not to mention the flesh. Once inserted into the body, the terrifying high temperature and the energy transmitted by the pattern array will melt the flesh in an instant. Gilliman once commented that the high-temperature mode of this thing is like a dagger version of a hot melt gun, and Frank thought it was very vivid. 3 minutes later, accompanied by a not-so-violent turbulence, they successfully docked with the space station. The spacecraft entered a dark space, and blue lights slowly lit up around it. A series of complex disinfection procedures were initiated. Another 10 minutes of waiting, when it was confirmed that there was no sign of contamination inside and outside the ship. The dark space became bright. Surrounding it were silver metal walls, and the metal on one wall slowly extended to the vicinity of the spacecraft for them to disembark. Frank walked out of the ship and looked down at the personal portable terminal placed on his left wrist. There were still 21 hours before the time agreed with Gilliman, and it took less than 3 hours to reach the Terra space station from Macrag's Glory. It was very fast. He walked forward, slowing down his pace so that Bonavia could keep up with him. The two of them crossed the silver bridge and arrived in front of the metal wall. Frank lowered his head and placed his right hand on the wall. Verification passed. The metal wall emitted a cold eye voice. The highest authority holder, codename Punisher. Where do you want to go? Area C, Frank said with ease. First go to the doctor, then go to Area D. I want to find a weapons craftsman. By the way, I will repair my ship as a whole. Please wait a moment. We are planning a route for you and retrieving the aircraft. The route is quite congested. Today, a fearless elder was cured and a celebration ceremony is being held inside the space station. Can you accept the transmission? Yes. Please wait a moment. The transmission is about to begin. Please keep a certain distance from your attendant. Bonavia quickly stood farther away from Frank. The blue light began to light up slowly, and after 2 seconds, it completely covered her left eye retina and the visual sensor of her right eye. When it returned to normal, they had arrived at Area C of the space station. It was not as lively as usual here, and it seemed very quiet. Today, a fearless elder was cured, which was a good thing among good things. and the celebration that followed was a double blessing. Most people chose to go to area of the space station to participate in the event. Only a few people who still needed to stick to their posts were still here. For example, the special doctor they were looking for. Bonavia walked through Area C with ease, and in just a few minutes, she found her destination. There was a sign with the 3 words "Doc" hanging at the door, and the door was closed. The silver walls were no different from the surroundings, and this store didn't even have windows. "Do you want to go in with me?" Bonavia asked. "No, I'll wait for you outside." Although the repairs are completed, Frank rejected her proposal with a very cold expression. "I don't like the race of that doctor." "I don't like it either, my lord, but His Royal Highness the Regent seems to like it." Bonavia nodded crisply, turned around, pushed open the door and walked in. The space inside was wide and soft white lights were on. A curvy figure was sitting with his back to her. On the operating table in front of him was a soldier of the Astra Militarum with his eyes closed. "Whoever you are, don't bother me first." The curvy figure didn't even turn his head back. His skilled High Gothic language was mixed with some strange accents, making it elegant and gentle. It sounded like an actor performing a play. Bonavia waited quietly as she was told, but in fact, she was not sitting there in a daze out of boredom. As mentioned earlier, the female judge liked her nanomechanical face for many reasons, such as this one, which allowed her to read books conveniently through the sensor in her right eye. Half an hour later, the doctor put down the scalpel in her hand with satisfaction. She took off the medical gloves covered with a mixture of blood and motor oil, threw them away, and the 2 gloves flew high and accurately hit the trash can at the other end of the room. The strange square silver bucket made a buzzing sound after receiving the garbage, and then stopped moving. The doctor stood up and pressed a few times on the operating table where the Astra Militarum was lying. It sank directly into the ground, and the pipeline would directly send him from the operating table to the medical cabin. Bonavia estimated that his injuries would only take 40 minutes to heal. "Okay, it's your turn." "Oh, it's you, Bonavia." The doctor turned around and raised her eyebrows in surprise, but she didn't waste too much time reminiscing about the past. She stomped her feet, and a brand new operating table rose from the ground again, and even the surgical instruments were brand new. Needless to say, Bonavia lay on it consciously. "Your examination period has expired?" The doctor stretched gracefully, revealing her perfect figure. "Or do you want to add some extras to yourself?" "Ah, then you may be disappointed." She nags. "I haven't passed the modification test yet, so I can't modify you for the time being. Of course, if you don't mind, I can also work without a license for you to try." Bonavia rejected her proposal without hesitation. "No, doctor, I'm just here for maintenance, and the inspection period has expired." "Okay, do you want anesthesia?" "Awake." "Okay, why don't all of you like anesthesia?" "It's painful to perform a parts replacement operation while awake." "Okay, if this continues, I will ask the space station to reduce the supply of anesthesia." This special doctor is obviously a chatterbox. She rolled up the white hair in front of her forehead and pinned it behind her pointed ears. Despite this, her hands were still moving fast. While complaining, she patted the side of the operating table, and a set of repair tools for replacing nanomachines replaced the surgical tools. This complex and very expensive tool set is only qualified to be used by 731 people in the space station. The complaining Eldar doctor is one of them. Don't ask why there's an Eldar doctor on Terra, and don't ask why Bonavia doesn't seem to have any objections to it. If you have any questions, turn right out and find Robert Gilliman. He has 1,000 reasons, and they're all valid. Chapter 665 Gilliman's Conversation. The doctor didn't lie, and Bonavia had already prepared herself mentally. Frankly speaking, it was really uncomfortable to replace parts while awake. If you have to put it bluntly, it was similar to a dentist using a dental drill to grind away a broken tooth. After the anesthesia, the pain was not that great. It was just a short-term soreness, but Bonavia didn't use anesthesia. She was in so much pain that her clothes were soaked through, but despite this, the female inquisitor remained silent throughout the process. Not even a cry of pain. This willpower made the doctor's eyes shine. When the repair work was finally completed, A smile appeared on her delicate face. The doctor didn't wear makeup, but she was still beautiful when she smiled. That's how the Eldar are. They are usually taller, thinner and more beautiful than humans. Bonavia was frozen by that smile. Is there anything wrong, doctor? No, nothing. I just want to ask, Bonavia. The doctor raised his hand and pinched the Inquisitor's earlobe with a smile. Do you like the opposite sex or the same sex? Please respect yourself. The Inquisitor, who had remained calm even when facing a whole ship of green beasts with Frank, was now panicking. She rolled off the operating table and ran to the door as if escaping. See you next time, doctor. Tsk. It's so boring. The doctor sighed. Alas, Lady Evelyn, how long do I have to stay here? Although I really like the feeling of being a doctor, Lady Evelyn in her mouth was having a very special conversation with a very special person on a very special ship. This was a conversation that would not be recorded and would not have any bystanders. Well, the 3-year probation period ends today. The Imperial Regent, the Primarch of the Ultramarines, the Supreme, extremely loyal, clean and upright Robert Gilliman was drinking from a teacup that fit his body shape. He said, "The effect of cooperation is good. Your people are indeed able to have excellent ability to track slain-ish believers and demons after undergoing the test." A gentle female voice laughed softly. The transformation is more or less the same, the essence is the same, but the nature is different. Gilliman took another sip of tea without changing his expression. They didn't die, but instead gained new abilities, right? Considering the fragile alliance between us, this is acceptable. Yes, but they are all under your surveillance, and many people have even changed their principles, including you. What do you think? Gilliman did not answer this question. The female voice laughed again. The proposal for cooperation is indeed good, I can't deny that. But I don't understand. How did you convince your men not to kill us? Because we can control ourselves, Gilliman replied. In the face of the interests of all mankind, some things are not enough to compare with it. Even if it is to endure your existence, even if you are allowed to board the sacred Terra space station, these are acceptable. Really? The woman who spoke finally walked out of the darkness. She was very tall, with snow-white hair tied into a neat high ponytail behind her head, and a black long dress. It didn't look like she was here to talk, but rather to accept an invitation to a dance party. The woman lifted her skirt gracefully and saluted. Even dance with me, Rob? You've crossed the line, Evelyn, Gilliman replied in a low voice. We are partners, nothing more. Really? Yes, then you are really ruthless. But then again, your father has no problem with our existence. In the face of the interests of all mankind, Gilliman repeated the sentence again. Some things are not worthy of comparison. I often think of one thing, Rob. Evelyn abruptly changed the subject. What will happen if we end our cooperation? It depends on the situation. Gilliman did not hesitate at all. If you choose to submit to the Empire, and all of you pass the test and trial of the array, then your Death Army will join the Empire, and a group of Eldar will become a new member of the Empire. Evelyn shook her head. This is impossible, isn't it? You are a Primarch, higher than us, but other humans. Rob, I won't use the word that makes you angry, because I have changed my mind about you, but my compatriots are not. Then let the war begin. Gilliman put down the teacup. The exquisite teacup was undoubtedly the work of the Eldar. It was a work of art. He said, I hope you understand, Evelyn. Being an enemy of the Empire is no different from seeking death. Of course I can see this. After all, you are protected by God. He is not God. I am talking about another one. Gilliman frowned. Who are you talking about? Evelyn avoided answering. She walked forward, standing. She was just the same height as Gilliman, who was sitting. The two looked at each other, and the atmosphere fell into silence for a while. You know who I'm referring to, Evelyn said slowly. Who else could it be? You are so lucky. After a god has grown old, you can still be favored by a new, even more powerful god. The air became cold, and the suppressed anger of the Primarch was making this secret room scream silently. Its stable structure began to tremble little by little, and before a certain point came, Gilliman took a deep breath. The temperature returned to normal. Don't try to cross my bottom line, Evelyn. Gilliman stood up. He pinched Eveline's neck and lifted her up. The latter did not resist, and even made him increase his strength. Her eyes rolled up slightly, revealing the whites of her eyes, and her breathing began to be difficult. But she still did not resist. The Primarch said gloomily, "I regard you as a friend, because you have helped me selflessly, and even more than once. But I will not condone your slander of an Imperial hero. Do you know his name? Do you know what great things he has done?" "I don't." "No." Eveline panted hard, her words intermittent. Gilliman released his hand and let Eveline return to the ground. His expression was still gloomy. "The cooperation will continue until the day when that damn evil god dies, and our cooperation agreement will still be valid. The Empire will fight against the demons and cultists of Slaanesh in the galaxy with you, and some of the people you selected will still be qualified to study in the Empire. But, Eveline, you'd better never try to cross my bottom line, in front of the whole of humanity." There is no Gilliman's expression turned into surprise, and Eveline smiled and took a few steps back. That smile was so cunning. After a while, the expression of His Royal Highness the Regent quickly twisted. He stood up suddenly, but Eveline had already left the room with her superb martial arts. Only one sentence was left: "You treat me as a friend, which is really good, Rob. I like it." Gilliman's face twitched, and he sat back in his original position. After a long time, he raised his hand and touched his lips. In fact, the description of the relationship between Everanne Gilliman in the official novel is quite ambiguous. Apart from the Gilliman Zeldar girlfriend joke, they should be considered friends. Of course, the damn GW once released a picture on Thanksgiving. Gilliman sat at the head seat, and Everett brought the turkey to the table to serve everyone. Chapter 666. Hi. Frank waited patiently. Don't get me wrong, Bonavia's problem had already been solved. He was waiting for his weapon to be repaired. Frank was not a very patient person. Sometimes he had no patience at all, such as when facing those damned people and aliens. However, people have two sides. The craftsman in front of him raised his hand and knocked on his head in distress, and the sound of metal clashing came out. "Oh, this Messiah, what did you do with this gun?" "I used it to kill 17 orcs," Frank replied, but not in the form of pulling the trigger. The craftsman's protruding red electronic eyes trembled violently. His modified and extremely stable mechanical arm almost dropped the gun to the ground. "My lord, is there something wrong with my auditory sensor?" "No problem, craftsman." Bonavia sighed and began to explain to him on behalf of Frank. The Punisher's language function seemed to have degenerated when facing humans, and he could always make some things very horrifying or vague. At this time, it was her turn to appear. "As you heard, the truth is, as the adults said, he used this gun to kill 17 orcs. So, can it be repaired?" Frank glanced at Bonavia, then turned his head and nodded. "Can it be repaired?" The craftsman's mechanical face began to tremble, which was a proof that he was doing calculations. This former technical priest of the Mechanicus, like all his colleagues, learned more advanced science and technology after coming to the Terra space station. Most people immediately modified themselves, such as more solid outer materials, more sophisticated sensors, and adding a lot of inexplicable functions. But this craftsman was an outlier. He was not very interested in other things, but only liked to make and repair weapons. So he didn't modify himself too much. On the contrary, in order to get more efficient computing power to satisfy his hobbies, he even gave up some stability. Because of this, his mechanical face was always shaking. 3 minutes later, the craftsman said in his synthesized voice with obvious noise, "It can be repaired, sir, but it will probably take about a day. In order to maintain the stability of this sacred grenade launcher and the machine soul inside it, I am afraid it will take a lot of time to repair it." "Ah, it would be great if it didn't have a machine soul." "I don't have that time. I will leave the Terra space station in 19 hours, Frank replied coldly, not caring about the machine soul he mentioned. "Well, then, do you mind leaving this sacred weapon with me first?" A mechanical tentacle stretched out from the craftsman's back, picked up the grenade launcher with a completely twisted handle and barrel, and put it into a huge backpack on his back. "Next time you come to the Terra space station, you can take it with you." Frank narrowed his eyes and watched another tentacle stretched out from the craftsman's back. The tentacle brought a completely new gun and placed it in front of him. As an alternative, if you don't mind, you can try my work. Frank raised his hand and picked up the brand new gun. The heavy touch immediately relaxed his brows. He carefully observed the gun. Its appearance was different from that of the grenade gun. There was no obvious violent aesthetics, but a low-key threat instead. The craftsman was still introducing. This is a new weapon I learned from my studies. There is no doubt that it is the embodiment of the destructive power of Om Messiah. It uses heavy explosives and has 17 rounds in the magazine. Of course, this is secondary. A simulated smile suddenly appeared on his mechanical face that was no longer related to humans. It was stiff and had the sound of steel rubbing against each other. As for its power, I assure you that it will never disappoint you. Frank did not test the power of the new weapon directly with the craftsman. He went back to his spaceship directly. He believed the craftsman's words. The ship was not big and could only accommodate 50 people, because it was not designed to carry people, but for extreme speed and concealment. In other words, this ship was specially designed for Frank. It was designed to allow him to travel and kill across the galaxy at the fastest speed. After completing the mission, he would leave quickly. There were still 5 hours before his ship was repaired, and Bonavia chose to go back to her room to take a nap. The mechanical part did not need to rest, but her human part still needed it. Frank returned to the cabin, and he took out the combat dagger again and played with it carefully. This was his pastime. However, a heavy sense of oppression came quietly. The hard alloy that formed the bulkhead began to make an unbearable whine. Frank raised his head and stared at the warning light above his head that did not change at all. Logically speaking, this level of pressure would have enabled its main control computer to activate the passive defense plan. However, let alone the passive defense plan, the main control computer did not say a word at this time, as if his ship did not have this thing installed at all. His eyes were fixed, and he had already stood up. He had been in this universe for several years. If you ask him what he learned from such a long period of killing, there is probably only one thing. In this galaxy, there is no so-called logic. Death is a sharp blade hanging over the head of every person, even every creature, and it may fall at any time. He held the battle dagger tightly. The space in the cockpit was narrow compared to his body size. If he wanted to fight here, he didn't plan to use a gun. What's more, even if it was a corn demon, he was confident that he could kill it here directly. Rather, he hoped that it was a corn demon. Killing only greenskins was not enough. However, he was destined to be disappointed. The pressure was getting more and more terrifying and huge. Even his bones, which were as strong as alloy, wailed. Frank inevitably reached out and held the wall. He had gritted his teeth and planned to resist this terrifying pressure, but after a certain point, it disappeared. Someone exhaled softly, and a breeze from nowhere began to swirl in the cockpit. The incredible thing happened in the next second. The wall that had been distorted by the pressure became flat again, and even the slight pain Frank felt in his body disappeared. Long time no see, Frank. I'm sorry for causing some trouble to your ship. It's me. Shenyan smiled and patted Frank's chest armor. Yes, I'm back. You guys are using the technology I sent back pretty well. Chapter 667 Come and learn magic from me, Gilliman. Frank naturally didn't think that Shenyan came to him to reminisce about the past. He had an archive in his mind, and he had established a set of analysis mechanisms for everyone. He didn't spend much time with the mage, but he also had many descriptions, character analyses, and psychological profiles. To be honest, he thought that Shenyan must have come here to give him a task. This made his eyes light up. Shenyan smiled helplessly when he saw that look. How could he not know Frank's character? Shaking his head, he said, You guessed it right. Yes, Frank, I do have a task for you. Gilliman, goodbye. Frank threw Gilliman's matter aside without hesitation. He hung the combat dagger back on his waist and asked, Where? Who to kill? How many? No number. This time I don't ask you to kill people, but to save people, Frank. Frank frowned. Save people? That's right, the mage smiled lightly. But this process will never let you down. How about it? Do you want to join? Who to save? A group of people who should not have died. The mage's voice became erratic, like dust scattered in the universe, but the voice was so powerful that it penetrated the curtain between reality and illusion and brought Frank's spirit to another realm. The golden light pierced the dark clouds above his head and shone on the broken earth. The ground was miserable as if it had been bombed for months. In the cracks of those deep pits, there were scattered flesh and bones that had been ground into dust. They lay together, all dead, but their spirits were still fighting endlessly in this place. Standing here, Frank took a deep breath of the air that still smelled of blood, and his expression began to change slightly. Shenyan suddenly appeared beside him without any warning. He seemed to have existed here forever, and he blended perfectly with the surrounding environment. However, with his appearance, the thick and strange clouds were torn apart even more severely. Golden light fell on the earth and on the wizard. He raised his hand, gently pulled a bunch of it and threw it into the distance. Do you know where this is, Frank? I can guess. Where else? Throughout the galaxy, there is blood and blood everywhere. It is not uncommon for the soil of a planet to be made of corpses. But there is only one place where there are so many Astartes corpses. Istvan III, the place where the heresy began. From this planet, War Master Horus and his ambition began to slide into the abyss, and he fell into the deepest part of hell. The empire fell apart, and the bright future of mankind was destroyed. The demigods and their descendants fought each other, and the Lord of mankind suffered for 10,000 years on his cold throne. What do you want me to do? It's not what I want you to do, Frank. It's what you want to do. Shenyan smiled meaningfully. They didn't deserve to die. What do you think? Died at the hands of their compatriots, wounded by the sword from behind. What a cruel ending. But they never gave in. The surrounding scene began to change rapidly, passing by Frank's eyes like a shredded rag. In the blink of an eye, he was back in his spaceship, but his nose still lingered with the smell of Istvan III, blood and fire, loyalty and death. He narrowed his eyes, and Shenyan's figure gradually disappeared in front of him. The arrival of the mage was as abrupt as his disappearance. Go, Frank, go to Istvan III. Gilliman was a little uneasy all day today, which was a rare situation. He felt that it was probably because of Eveline's behavior that crossed the line. This made him a little angry, and he planned to give her a taste of pain the next time they met. However, what really made him angry was Frank's communication. What do you mean you don't want the mission? I just picked one out for you. Istvan III. What are you doing there? Rescue people? Damn, do I look like a fool, Frank? There's no one alive in that place. Frank. Gilliman tried his best to suppress his urge to throw the portable personal terminal on the floor. The longer he dealt with Frank, the more he couldn't control his emotions when facing him. Frank Custer always had a way to make everyone angry. Gilliman doubted that even Vulcan, who was known for his good temper, would be pissed off by Frank. He started to call Frank back with a gloomy face. The communication of the portable personal terminal did not rely on electronic signals or other things. It relied on the built-in array. The distance between Macrag's Glory and Terra Space Station was not enough to prevent the array from communicating. However, his communication was rejected by Frank again and again. Gilliman was not surprised by this result, but he was still angry. Why is he always like this? He waved his arms in anger. Fortunately, no one saw this, otherwise his image might have been greatly degraded. Emperor, why is he always unwilling to listen to my arrangements? Is a perfect plan not as good as his improvisation? Maybe it's because he has his own ideas. A voice appeared in his office, followed by a figure slowly emerging from the air. Gilliman frowned at first, then relaxed. He stood up in surprise, walked out of the table and gave the person in front of him a hug. Let's talk it over. Gilliman, you send me away first, and we don't seem to be that familiar, right? Gilliman smiled awkwardly, let go of his hand and took a step back. The wizard straightened his black robe and spoke, I'm sorry to disrupt your mission arrangement for him, but it was me who asked him to go to Istvan III. Why? That planet is already a dead planet. Facing Gilliman's question, the wizard just smiled mysteriously. Most of the time he didn't want to be a riddler, but he liked to see people thinking. Some people shouldn't die like this, right? Besides, The universe we live in is a world where science and magic coexist, whether you admit it or not. Gilliman, sometimes, there are always things that cannot be explained by science. From this point of view, you may need to broaden your horizons. As if he was interested, he changed the subject and naturally opened a topic that made Gilliman's pupils tremble. Are you interested in learning magic from me, Robert Gilliman? If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelist. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We are waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 668 Ordinary. In terms of manifestation, magic undoubtedly has many similarities with Nyx. However, Gilliman certainly knew that the magic in Shenyan's mouth and the Nyx he was familiar with were two different things. Nyx is a power that has not yet been fully developed. So far, humans' understanding of it is just to divide it into 5 schools. This is the classification made by the Thousand Sons before the Great Heresy, and now it has been a full 10,000 years. What can Nyx do? Well, a lot of things. Vague prophecies, mind reading, environmental perception, and even being able to predict the opponent's next thought in battle. Teleportation, telekinesis, time manipulation, elemental empowerment, a series of methods beyond the scope of science can all be classified as Nyx. However, powerful Nyx are rare. In the final analysis, it is because this ability comes from the warp. When Nyx use Nyx, their souls will also be exposed to the gaze of the demons in the warp, dangerous and uncontrollable. The reason why humans still use it is because there is no other way. They must survive, and for this purpose, don't say it's risky. Even morality and humanity can be abandoned when necessary. Magic. Gilliman spoke, his voice hoarse. What exactly is it? Shenyan snapped his fingers and conjured up an armchair. As usual, velvet, lavender lining, square armrests, allowing him to tap his fingers on it to make crisp sounds. I appreciate your attitude, Gilliman. Some people think that magic should not be quantified, and is a complex and idealistic force. But in fact, magic can be recognized, classified, and even fully mastered. The wizard smiled. I used to say that magic is a miracle. Yes, part of it is indeed a miracle, but now I find that it is not all. Let's get back to the topic. Your Highness the Regent, do you want to learn magic from me? It would be a lie to say that he was not tempted. As a politician, Gilliman sometimes does use the art of lying, but he can't lie to himself. If a person wants to lie to himself, how miserable would he be? However, the problem lies in another thing. Everyone has a reason for doing anything. Even the Emperor is no exception. So, why did the wizard ask this question? Just by exchanging glances with Gilliman, Shenyan knew exactly what he was thinking. He smiled again. 30% of interest, 40% of sincerity, and 30% of wanting you to be my teacher. Gilliman's expression gradually became stunned, but Shenyan was still explaining. He didn't intend to hide anything. I have always been more casual about doing things, regardless of the cost. You should have known how the deep destruction came about, and what I did when I was near the Eye of Terror. So, Gilliman, I am indeed a casual person, and I don't intend to hide this. But, I am also more serious in some aspects. For example, I am serious about your talent for magic. But, how could that be? Gilliman couldn't help but interrupt. You believe in the imperial truth, and you want to understand the world scientifically. You hate religions, and think they are all full of madness. You think psychic power is an uncontrollable force, although this does not prevent you from respecting those dedicated psychics. Fingers tapped on the armrest, and the crisp and uninterrupted tapping sound rang out in Gilliman's office. So, the wizard asked calmly, what I'm talking about is magic. Gilliman, read after me. Magic. It is not psychic power or all similar witchcraft, sorcery and the like in your cognition. It is not. The form of expression is just an appearance. In those worlds without science, magic is another way for people to understand the world. I can say that magic is essentially another kind of science, because it also emphasizes logic, but it is a kind of logic that does not require much logic. The wizard raised his right hand, and a little orange-yellow flame appeared on the tip of his index finger. Fire can be transformed into water, like this. The scene in front of Gilliman blurred for a moment, and the flame turned into a ball of water. Mages who are proficient in the art of evocation believe that any element is controllable, whether it is an element created by magic or an element existing in nature. The essence lies in using the spirit to understand and control everything. This is the underlying logic of elemental transformation. To put it more simply, you think fire can turn into water, okay, you can. You think water can turn into lightning. Is that also possible? The smile on Shenyan's face gradually widened. Of course it can be. The water ball gradually compressed and disappeared. Gilliman captured the transformation process that Shenyan deliberately slowed down with his superhuman vision. He saw a flash of purple lightning appear on the tip of the mage's index finger. His breathing stagnated. What Shenyan just said was to make him jump out of his original way of thinking and look at the world with a new perspective. This is difficult. In fact, it's as difficult as climbing to heaven. No one can completely jump out of their original way of thinking, and even the Emperor probably wouldn't say that he can do this, because he is also a human being. He will always have things he likes and things he hates, such as art and religion, such as progress and ignorance. This is difficult. Gilliman said honestly, I know what you mean, but I don't think I have the ability to do it. Shenyan bent the purple lightning, wrapped it around his fingers and let it flow. Feeling the numbness of the electric shock, he said lazily, that's okay, you can be an ordinary mage. Elemental transformation is a very profound thing. You don't need to learn it to do a lot of things. He bent the fingers of his left hand, for example, teleporting thousands of people from your ship to the local ship, for example, healing spells to keep the lives of seriously injured and dying soldiers, for example, large-scale production of food and clean medicines, and even making a building rise from the ground with just a flick of the finger. How is this ordinary? Gilliman dared to swear to the Emperor that he really recited the word Emperor in his heart just now so as not to swear. How is this ordinary? Is there something wrong with your definition of ordinary? Then, he immediately thought of another question. You said I should be your teacher. Gilliman stood up from his chair. Can all ordinary mages do these things? Shenyan nodded with a smile. There are 3 more chapters. Chapter 669. Different Stone. Far away on the frontier of the Empire, in the cold and ruthless dark deep space, Steve Rogers is leading a fearless army to fight against a group of savage green beasts. The war has lasted for 3 months. Steve is used to the duration of the war, but he has not yet fully adapted to the intensity of this war. The last war he experienced was called World War II, which was nothing compared to this large-scale interstellar battle across planets. However, he can still hold on. Let the artillery position on the left support us. Inside the helmet, he heard his voice echoing, and his vision was wrapped in a green living hell. All over the mountains, green beasts wearing rough and hideous armor were shouting and attacking them. Their low Gothic language sounded like torture, but despite this, there was no hatred in the eyes of these creatures. This was rare, and Steve was surprised. All he saw was a sincere desire to fight. It was as if these creatures just wanted to fight. It didn't matter who the target was. Sir, the artillery position has just been lost. The officer in charge of contacting him answered anxiously. A group of cunning orcs attacked them. Can we really not use war mechas? Don't let the intensity of the war escalate again. You should know better than me what kind of evolution the orcs will undergo after encountering advanced technology. Steve rejected his proposal, and at the same time, he tightened his hand on the long sword burning with golden flames and took a step forward. He raised his hands high. His will moved his nerves. The nerves drove his arms, and the muscles moved. The terrifying power split the huge orc in front of him in half from head to tail. The opponent's armor, which was so solid that it could even withstand a volley of grenade launchers, seemed like paper. Seeing this scene, the orcs who were shorter than it suddenly shouted in surprise and fear. Some ran back and fell into the volley of fire from the soldiers behind him, while some rushed towards him fearlessly, and their bodies even became slightly larger. Monster. Steve narrowed his eyes. Before this, he had never fought against such an enemy. 3 months have passed since the war began. Steve has been sighing like this while being in this meat grinder. A shell from the rear of the orcs landed in front of him, and was blocked by Steve's psychic barrier. The shell, which was more like a mixture of garbage than a shell, didn't even splash the soil. Steve raised his outstretched left hand and flicked it. The shell whizzed past and returned to where it came from. Staring at the orc-heavy firepower position that had just been destroyed, his expression did not relax at all. In the past 3 months, he has never been able to leave this star field and end the war, because every planet is full of damn orcs. Evolved, thick-skinned, fearless, weapons and armor that look like a joke but are strong and powerful. There are so many of them everywhere. Moreover, before they arrived, these things were already killing each other for fun. At first, someone suggested using orbital bombardment to directly wash the surface of the planet, but this request was quickly rejected because their 3 new warships were too powerful. That was not orbital bombardment, that was planetary bombardment. The most embarrassing point was here. There were 4 planets in this star field, before those orcs occupied here. They were very important resource planets. They could produce a lot of minerals, and the Empire could not give them up. Waste is unbearable. The orcs were gradually beaten back. Temporarily, they would organize another attack in just a few hours. Steve was used to this kind of going to work like fighting. He had been here for 5 days and had never pushed the front line forward. This was the reason. This orc tribe could always organize a counterattack. Their source of troops seemed endless, which was really strange. Looking at the backs of their deserters, Steve narrowed his eyes. A general came to him to report, his face full of blood and his throat hoarse. Report: 71 people died in this battle, 120 were seriously injured, and 113 were slightly injured. The war losses were acceptable, but Steve still frowned for this. For him, the death of anyone is unacceptable. However, he had no choice. How could there be no war without death? Are there enough medical cabins? He asked. It was already overloaded when we met the enemy last time. The general still reported meticulously, seemingly without emotion, but his eyes were full of anger. My lord, this is not a solution. Relax. Steve raised his hand and pressed it on his shoulder, emphasizing his tone. Don't let anger blind your eyes. The hands of each of these beasts are stained with the blood of our brothers, so they will definitely pay the price. But you must stay calm. Go back and rest. There is not much time. Hold on to it and recover your strength. I will transfer another batch of medical cabins. The general stopped talking, silently performed the Sky Eagle salute, and left. Steve sighed, and an Astartes came forward. The main body of the armor was blue, and there was a blood-red fist on the shoulder armor. My lord, his voice was similar to 2 swords rubbing against each other. Because of a battle 70 years ago, his vocal cords were damaged by a vicious blade, and he could only recover to this state afterwards. No brothers were injured in this battle. He shrugged humorously. It seems that our luck has finally improved. Steve laughed dumbly at the optimism and humor of this warrior. The good luck he mentioned came from a darker joke in their regiment. Once, when they were attacking orcs, a whirlwind torpedo that had been launched inexplicably returned, destroying their own fortress monastery, and killing 600 brothers. Do you usually tell such jokes to your brothers, Pablo? The Astartes called Pablo immediately shook his head. My brothers may not tell a joke in 100 years. Then you must be very uncomfortable usually. Yeah, after all, they are all like stones. Well, I am a relatively rare kind of stone. Steve hammered his shoulder armor quite affectionately. Okay, stop telling jokes. Is the ammunition reserve sufficient? Of course, sir. After all, we don't have many opportunities to go to the front line. The implicit complaint in his words was naturally noticed by Steve, and he smiled helplessly. It's not that I don't let you fight, but it's not the time yet. The orcs on this planet are obviously stronger than those on other planets. You need to save your firepower for the critical moment. As for now, he waved his hand, aren't our brave Astra Militarum doing a bad job? Chapter 670 New Technology News. Of course, Pablo couldn't say that they were not doing well. If someone could say that, he would not only be the first to object, but he might even fight the guy who said that. No matter who said that, after witnessing the bravery of the Astra Militarum, Pablo would definitely let him taste the taste of his fist. A group of mortals, braving the mountains and plains of orcs, Came here first and fought with them for half a month. What else do you want? What else can you ask of them? Ask them to kill all the orcs here? Ah, that's fine. Unless they are all given a transformation package, and all 80,000 Astra Militarum on this planet are transformed into Astartes. He just felt depressed about this. The Imperial Fists and their successor chapters all regard honor as their life. The extreme ones among them will even deliberately put themselves in danger for some glory. The more peaceful ones will also do their best to fight for the vanguard position before the war. But on the other hand, their observance of discipline is also well known. What's more, this is the leader of a Primarch. The warriors of the Crimson Fists know his identity, which Steve had explained on the first day of the meeting. This matter has not yet been fully disclosed within the Empire, so the warriors of the Crimson Fists feel very honored. A Primarch, brand new. Pablo's eyes glanced at the long sword burning with golden flames in Steve's right hand without leaving a trace, and his throat rolled up and down. He really wanted to ask if he could touch it, but his reason persuaded him in time. What to touch? Crazy? Let's go back to the position first, Steve said, and took him to the back. Along the way, you can see many Astra Militarum soldiers collecting the empty magazines thrown on the ground. They have replaced the new weapons from the Revenge. The Star Battleship and the Black Dragon have become some kind of holy objects and are no longer used easily. The former is because the casting lines on it are irreplaceable, and the latter is because it is too precious. No one can afford the cost of its loss. Although Steve has a lot of complaints about this, there is nothing he can do. After all, the only man who can repair the deep destruction is not here. Back to the point, the weapon that the Astra Militarum replaced was an energy weapon. Unlike the light guns that the Empire usually used, it fired air bullets that were constructed with complex patterns inside. Don't think that the name of air bullets sounds ineffective. You wouldn't think so if you saw them destroy a main battle tank with a single volley. This weapon has almost no recoil, and the bullet body is invisible. Even if you attack by surprise, you don't have to worry about exposing your position like a laser gun. There is no need for maintenance, because the material that makes it up is incredibly strong. It can even be used as a blunt weapon when it is empty. More than one soldier used it to beat some orcs and splattered their brains all over the floor. At the same time, it has a very large magazine, 50 rounds of bullets, and a fast firing rate. If you have to say it, there is only one disadvantage. That is their magazine. The magazine is fixed with a recovery pattern, and magic power is automatically generated inside. A series of complex principles are designed, but the final result is that the magazine can be used indefinitely, but it just takes time to recover. The magic power of 50 rounds of bullets can be recovered in about half an hour. Therefore, the empty magazines had to be picked up one by one. Moreover, the main advantage of this weapon was that it was cheap. Compared with the production price of war mechas, the raw materials and time required for this weapon were ridiculously cheap. 300 can be produced in an hour. What does this mean? Gilliman's mouth was crooked with smiles at that time, and he immediately decided to start replacing this gun with laser guns throughout the Empire. Anyone who has a concept of war will not ignore the huge potential of this gun, and for this reason, it was given a somewhat heavy name, Imperial Resurrection R1. R, taken from the first letter of the Revenge, 1, is easy to understand. The first work to be equipped by the whole army. As he walked, he greeted the soldiers. Everyone knew him, and he seemed to know most of them. Pablo was once again surprised by this scene. Steve was the first Primarch he had seen who could even remember the names of most mortal soldiers. No one had done this before him. It took only 7 minutes to reach the position. It was more like a fortress than a position. A heavy, solemn black building, square and solemn. There are black gun barrels in the observation hole, and troop carriers keep coming and going at the door, bringing in the wounded or taking the soldiers who are still able to fight to other positions. There are 4 more such positions on this planet. If nothing unexpected happens, Steve will go to each one. In fact, they didn't exist originally, but the new technology is so easy to use. If possible, Steve really wants to give Shenyan a kiss. He knows that the latter will not accept it, but he must do it. What is the concept of building a solid building that can withstand hundreds of artillery bombardments in 20 minutes? The concept is that in the future, When fighting such troublesome wars, there is no need to spend a huge amount of sacrifice to clear a position. Just sit on the spacecraft, select one or several locations, and then airdrop them down, and then wait. Not only is it fast, but it can even kill some enemies in the process. The fortress will not mind using some fresh flesh and blood to transform into magic to speed up the process during the rise. Entering the fortress, the first thing you see in the first floor hall is not a row of beeping instruments or officers communicating with various positions. Their spacecraft is parked above the planet, and the new communication can already take on this task. Therefore, the first floor hall and the remaining space of the entire fortress are basically occupied by medical cabins, except for the necessary canteen, toilets and dormitories for soldiers to rest. There are medical cabins everywhere. These things are also good treasures. Pablo couldn't help but sigh. When he first learned about the medical cabin and its function, he was shocked for a while, because a brother who was seriously injured enough to make people pray to the emperor was put in, and an hour later, he walked out alive and well, intact. In the true sense of the word, even the hair loss on the back of his head was healed. This bastard grew long hair while fighting in the war, which made several people want to cut his hair more than once. However, from another perspective, Steve and Pablo didn't want there to be so many medical cabins here. There are about 700 medical cabins in the fortress, all requisitioned from 3 spaceships. Advanced teleportation technology allows them to appear instantly. However, more of them means more casualties. Seeing this, Steve's expression darkened. Go and inform your brothers to be ready. Pablo. Chapter 671, Fight. It's time. Steve thought he was not a weak-willed person. He had not allowed the Crimson Fists to participate too much before just to ensure that they could maintain their manpower as much as possible. After all, if they fought the orcs to the end, they would have to meet their orc boss. In that kind of battle, sending mortal soldiers to fight was equivalent to sending them to death, unless he immediately sent 20 heroic blades down, in which case, not to mention the orc boss, even 5 more would be chopped off. But in that case, we just had to wait for one of them to suddenly have an idea and start to piece together the iron shells into mechas of the same size. There was a precedent for this, and no one knew what strange things they could do. No one knew how they did it. The orcs were more evil than the devilish evil gods of the warp. At least the demons of those evil gods were willing to follow the laws of physics when they appeared in the material world. Thinking of this, Steve couldn't help but have a headache. There was no way. The disgusting point of the orcs was not only this, but also the cleaning work on the ground after the war. You know, the flesh and blood of these guys can spread spores. If left alone, more orcs will soon be born. Soon, the warriors of the Crimson Fists gathered in front of the fortress. They were not many in number, and the permanent strength of the chapter was only 1,000. After that unfortunate disaster, they lost 600 people at once, and now they have only recovered to 500. The whole group is out. If the opponent is not an orc, they may not treat it like this. Standing in front of these 500 Astartes, Steve's pre-war declaration was not too long. He has always been better at expressing with actions rather than just words. I am not a person who likes to talk a lot, everyone, but I already know the anger and dissatisfaction in your hearts. Don't rush to deny it. I know this very well, so I need to explain something, he said with a serious face. The reason why I didn't let you really participate in the battle before is, first, it is unnecessary. The Astra Militarum is enough to deal with orcs of this level. Second, it is because of my misjudgment. He readily admitted his mistake. I mistakenly thought that this war would not require the power of the Astartes, but I was wrong. Orcs cannot be judged by common sense. They are natural weapons of war. Even the small ones that would be eaten as food by larger orcs have the ability to kill. I think I can say that they are a group of biological weapons, a terrible race that is specifically designed to kill. Before we arrived, the miners and soldiers on these 4 mineral worlds were slaughtered, and this was exactly what they did. But fortunately, so are you. The golden flames on the longsword suddenly lit up, and Steve raised it straight up and pointed it to the sky. You are also superhuman warriors created by nature, killing weapons, even stronger, faster, and more ruthless than them. because you are the angels of death of the Emperor of Mankind, his wrath, his coldness. Now, let's start this killing." The flaming sword was swung down, and the spacecraft far above the planet's orbit used the data obtained by remote sensing mapping that had been determined early in the morning to accurately transmit them to the location of the Orc boss. Today is the day of its death. Meanwhile, on the other side of the galaxy, a man was walking in death and spreading more. His name was Angren. He was not wearing armor, but just holding the lightning axe. Angren's movements could not be described as fast as thunder, because he was thunder itself. The huge force made the axe create a huge wound on the enemy's body. He grinned, very satisfied with the result of his battle. He took a step forward and bent his knees slightly. The precise control of force and speed allowed him to quickly withdraw the axe blade and rotate it to inflict secondary damage. A hideous head flew high, with twisted horns, scarlet eyes, and red skin. Next, he stood on a huge rock protruding in the valley and said to the demons around him with a grin, "Come again. Don't you want to kill me? Come on, die one by one. You are too arrogant, human." A corn demon that did not look as strong as its kind jumped onto the rock, holding an equally hideous axe in his hand. It bared its sharp teeth and cursed with vicious words. "You come here alone to challenge me. How long do you really think you can hold out?" "I will hold out until your mother is chopped to death by me." "Oh, sorry, you don't seem to have a mother." "I apologize." Angren's vulgar words made it twitch. "You damn worm. If it weren't for our pride as warriors, you would have been chopped into paste by us long ago." "Warriors' pride?" Angren smiled coldly, and something in the clouds above his head began to roll endlessly, making a huge roar. "You are worthy? Ha! I proposed the death battle. You just know that if you don't agree, you will be destroyed immediately by a blast of energy cannon. There is no honor in such a death. It is better to fight to the death with me." The demon's face became more distorted, and Angren waved to it. "Come on, it's your turn, trash. Fight me." "How dare you!" Before it could finish its words, it was hit by an axe in the chest. Lightning was released from the axe, and in an instant, it had anesthetized its muscles. The demon screamed loudly. The psychic lightning was destroying its muscles and nerves. This kind of pain was unbearable for a living creature. But it was a corn demon after all, so it still raised its right hand and wanted to fight back. But unfortunately, in the next second, Angren swung the axe and chopped off its head. The skull rolled down and filled the gap between the protruding rocks. Seeing this, the corn demons raised their weapons more enthusiastically. They actually enjoyed this life and death battle. Blood, fighting, and glorious death. What else do you need besides not being able to kill? Without Angren's urging, the next demon jumped up and couldn't wait to swing the twisted longsword in his hand. The Lord of Red Sand smiled disdainfully, but this time, he did not attack. Instead, he snapped his fingers. His body disappeared from the spot in the wave. Before the corn demons could figure out what happened, a low humming sound came from the gloomy clouds above their heads, like a sign of some terrifying beast before eating. The next second, a huge beam of light fell from the sky, turning all the demons on the surface into ashes. On the spaceship, Angren wiped the blood from his face and laughed disdainfully. "Do you really think I will fight you in a round-robin battle until death? No brain is no brain." His arrogant look made a giant standing next to him sigh helplessly. He had a pair of wings on his back, and his appearance was handsome and approachable. At this time, that face was making a sad face. "You are too brave to do this, Angren, fighting a group of corn demons without armor." Alas, the fourth update is over. Chapter 672 Mission and Talent. With an expression that made Sanguineous blood pressure rise, Angren nodded as a matter of course. "But I won." What if you lose? "I won't lose." "You can't discuss this topic with me using an uncertain result as an assumption, Angren." Sanguineous' expression gradually became serious. "Our energy cannon can completely cleanse the demons on the surface, and can even track their lives through arrays to disperse and attack them. And, if you wear power armor to fight them, I will think you are looking for death." Angren turned his head and curled his lips where Sanguineous couldn't see, but he still heard the TSK. The Archangel immediately frowned. "We are discussing a serious issue now. I know you are unhappy because you can't rebuild your legion, but you can't joke with your life just to vent your anger. I didn't joke with my life. Seeing that he was really angry, Angren immediately put on a sincere apology. I don't have to pay the price of risking my life to deal with them. Okay, okay. I promise you that this will never happen again. Sanguinius stared at him for a long time before nodding and reaching out to take out his portable personal terminal. This precious new technology is currently only owned by a few people in the entire empire. What it can do is really terrible. Although the name sounds like a cheap assembly line product. In fact, Sanguinius pressed the button on the side of the personal terminal, and then clicked a few times on the screen. A man's voice sounded from the personal terminal. Cran samples, who is calling me? It's me, Sanguinius. The archangel slowed down his tone to avoid bringing his dissatisfaction with Angren into the new conversation. He said, "Where are you, Crane? I'm still 3 sectors away from you. Don't expect me to arrive within a week." Crane's voice was as cold as ever. "Also, has Frank contacted you?" Sanguinius and Angren looked at each other. "No, what's the matter?" He said that he is back and gave him a mission. Angren raised his eyebrows and shook his head firmly. "I don't believe it. This must be an excuse for him to go out and work alone. Why didn't he come to me first when he came back?" Sanguinius was shocked by his matter-of-fact tone and turned his head to look at him with a strange expression. On the other end of the personal terminal, even Crane was silent. After several seconds, he spoke again. "I don't think Frank would use this kind of thing as an excuse. He is more stubborn than us in some aspects. In addition, he said he was going to Istvant 3. Why is he going there? He didn't tell me, but, as far as I know, Fulgrim is also on that planet, right?" Faced with Crane's question, Angren rolled his eyes. "Yes. The noble young master stayed on that planet for 3 years. He ran there as soon as the Battle of Terra was over." "Humphrey, I don't know what he was doing there. My personal suggestion is..." Crane's voice gradually became blurred and echoed. Sanguinius knew that this was because he put on his helmet. The helmet used by Crane samples would distort his voice into some kind of terrifying echo so that he could inflict fear on the enemy. This always reminded Sanguinius of another brother, and both of them also like bats. Change course and head for Istvant 3. "Why?" the man wearing a helmet and transforming into Batman said. "Because, according to my calculations, Frank has a 75% chance of conflict with Fulgrim. It's best for you to arrive at the scene to mediate. It's also a good opportunity to verify whether he is really back." He hung up the communication. "We haven't finished talking yet, have we?" Angren asked with dissatisfaction. "Why did he hang up like that?" Sanguinius shook his head. "Have some basic patience with your brother, Angren. You know his character. Most likely he saw something or someone that needs to be dealt with on the way." "What you said makes me feel a little sympathetic to the things he needs to deal with." With a sneer, Angren stood up. Although he said it, he was still willing to obey Crane's orders. After all, the gloomy guy had never made any mistakes. Considering that he was not good at thinking, Angren decided to listen. There was no harm anyway. 3-star regions away, a ship that was not too big stopped on a certain hive planet. It did not send a request to the hive to dock or land, but directly connected to its orbit. The behavior was no different from robbery, but no one in the hive noticed it, and even the computer itself did not know about it. In the cockpit, a dark figure was making pre-combat plans. He was alone, and his enemy might be the entire world. Hives, generally speaking, are giant cities with a high population density, ranging from billions to hundreds of billions of people. They are giant cities standing on the wreckage of planets, and may extend from top to bottom for thousands of meters. Crane is very familiar with this kind of world. The hive often reminds him of Gotham. The same sin, the same upper-class people enjoy everything, and the lower-class people pay everything. But he is not Batman. He can kill people. He raised his hand and pressed a button in the cockpit. Amid a series of complex instrument reports, Crane set the transmission time to 1 minute later, and the location was the bottom of the hive in front of him. He came here with a mission. The original Inquisition had been completely destroyed. From top to bottom, the entire Inquisition had been thoroughly purged. Inquisitors of any faction were not exempt from the purge, and Clan was the Inquisitor of the Inquisitors. His unique ability allowed him to see through people's hearts. Nothing could hide its heart under that ability. Only a few truly innocent inquisitors survived, and they were absorbed into a new organization. This organization has not yet been named, but what it does is actually not much different from the Inquisition. The leader is Clan. In other words, he has to rebuild an Inquisition. This is a heavy task that seems to have no end. You know, the work of the Inquisitors is not as easy as described in those novels circulating in the black market, like driving a ship to a planet and falling in love with a beautiful silver-haired planetary governor, and then breaking the chaos conspiracy and becoming a hero. Well, maybe some people have done this, but they are a minority. Most Inquisitors investigate and collect evidence silently. They have no names or surnames. They unravel countless mysteries and eventually find factors that may threaten humanity and eliminate them. From this point of view, they can actually be regarded as some kind of doctors. Because of this, those who become Inquisitors must have some extraordinary qualities. Moreover, considering that this institution has been corrupted once before, Crane will raise the requirements even higher this time. He certainly knows how deep-rooted the dark side of human nature is. Because of this, he cannot relax, not for a moment. With a flash of blue light, he disappeared in the cockpit. When he appeared again, he was already standing in a shanty town at the bottom of the Hive City. It was the night defined by the planet, and people were sleeping. There was no entertainment for the lower-level people. In fact, there was even a curfew. The purpose was naturally to fight against the gangs. But was it really effective? The reading on the retina clearly showed the existence of a sentry post 700 meters ahead. There were 12 Astra Militarum soldiers and 7 combat servants there. Such firepower was enough for the gangs at the bottom of the Hive City. Usually enough. Crane calmly lifted his cloak, and the night obscured his figure. The use of his talent was as natural as breathing and drinking water. The distance of 700 meters was silently crossed in just 2 seconds. He came to the sentry gate, standing in front of the Astra Militarum and the combat servants, facing the spotlights and heavy machine guns, but no one noticed him. Crane stared at the 12 Astra Militarum soldiers on guard with cold eyes. Their positions were very particular and meticulous. They could ensure that everything was covered, and they could quickly gather together to form a concentrated fire when danger came. Their combat literacy was very high. Nodding silently, he left here again like a ghost. Walking forward, the intricate, maze-like environment of the hive did not let him get lost. He came to a deep cave, which was very hidden. The scanning function of the eyepiece told him that there were 76 gangsters resting inside. That's it. Crane stepped in, and the sentry sitting at the door did not notice his approach. He held a small square object in his hand, from which 2 long wires extended into the sockets on the back of his head. It was obvious that he had been modified. As for what he was watching, Crane didn't even need to think to know. It was nothing more than a series of stimulating black market videotapes, with everything from simple physical pleasure to more horrific things. Yes, this thing will attract the attention of Slaanesh. Crane reached out his hand, and the cold air destroyed the sentinel's brain in an instant. His eyes rolled up and he leaned back in the chair with his mouth wide open. Saliva flowed from his mouth, his hands tilted down weakly, and the man was dead. This was the first one. He walked deeper into the cave. The night was still long, and the killing would continue. For him, this was just a small part of a long job. Crane didn't know what he was about to encounter here. Keep your breathing steady. Gilliman did as he was told. Close your eyes. He closed his eyes. Do you feel it? Feel what? He shook his head in confusion, but the next second after shaking his head, thousands of tiny light spots floating in the air appeared in front of him. Gilliman had his eyes closed, but he could still see them. This seemed that violated common sense stunned him. Don't just stand there, try to think about it, and let the light spot closest to you float over. How to do this? Gilliman was at a loss for a long time before he began to think. This behavior that completely challenged his cognition of the world was naturally very difficult to implement. Fortunately, after a few minutes, he succeeded. A tiny light spot floated over, and he naturally raised his hand and held it in his palm. Not bad. Open your eyes. When he opened his eyes, he saw the wizard standing opposite him with a helpless look on his face, holding a heavy iron rod in his hand. Open your hand. Let me see. Gilliman obediently opened his right hand, and a crystal-clear white light spot floated above his palm, emitting a faint light and bringing some warmth. Shenyan looked at it with disdain and sighed. Why only one? He shook his head. This shouldn't be the case. Is this good or bad? Gilliman asked. Of course it's bad, Shenyan said mercilessly. This means that the magic power you can absorb is very limited. I expect you to have more than 3. For some reason, Gilliman suddenly had the illusion of returning to his childhood and learning humbly. However, at that time, he was never told that he was bad. He could learn anything at once, and this was the first time. Gilliman gradually felt a desire to win. He said in a deep voice, "Can we do it again? Let's talk about it tomorrow." The wizard rejected his proposal and handed him the iron rod. Gilliman reached out and grasped it, asking in confusion, "What's the use of this?" "Try to pour magic power into it, just like I told you." Close your eyes and carefully feel the possible connection between this iron rod and magic power. You must learn this, Gilliman, otherwise you will encounter great difficulties in the subsequent courses. I don't have time to teach you from the basics. Let's try to run before we go. Gilliman gradually calmed down as the wizard chattered. He felt it carefully as Shenyan said. At this moment, he gradually abandoned his past and deep-rooted cognition of the world. Instead, he adopted a completely new perspective. As if he had suddenly opened his eyes, he was surprised to find that the world in front of him was different. The iron rod in his hand seemed to be breathing, and the strange scene gave him goosebumps. Then, he suddenly noticed a little disharmony in the composition of this round iron rod. It seemed to be missing something. Unable to restrain himself, Gilliman pressed the magic light spot in naturally, just like breathing. He felt a burning pain in his hand, and when he opened his eyes, he found that the iron rod was actually burning with fire. Not bad. Shenyan finally smiled. At least you are very talented in enchanting. Enchant? Yes. Enchanting is just the most basic way to increase the lethality of weapons. When you are familiar with it, you can also perform various enhancements on power armor. Of course, enchanting and enhancement spells also have something in common. Maybe you are also quite talented in enhancement spells. Shenyan nodded thoughtfully. Do you want to learn Titan's power? I just made an improvement to it. For some reason, the moment he heard the name of this spell, Gilliman suddenly felt a chill in his spine. Chapter 673, Canned Boss and Orc Boss. Cruel war, inhumane war, war that annihilates everything and sacrifices everything. Pablo has many prefixes to the word war in his mind. He is not a pitiful machine that has been wiped out by war, at least he thinks he is not. In his spare time from fighting, Pablo likes to write jokes or think about the appearance of his father whom he has never met. Although he has lost the ability to feel family affection, he still likes to pass the time this way. However, he never thought that one day he would be able to add the prefix simple to the word war. However, in the 37 minutes since the end of the transmission, everything he has seen tells him this fact. This is a simple war. They have never fought side by side with a prime arch. Perhaps the elders of the mother group have had the honor to experience such a scene, but this is their first time. And this kind of battle, it is no exaggeration to say that Pablo even feels that under the leadership of the majestic figure in front of them, they can kill any enemy that stands in their way. Is it an illusion? It remains to be tested. Pablo, who came up with another not-so-funny cold joke, twitched the corner of his mouth. He raised his right hand, and the bolter accurately hit an orc who was hiding behind the corpse of his companion and trying to attack. Its head was smashed into pieces by the bullet. This adjective is a bit strange for a pierced head, but it is the fact. And there is another fact. The orcs were routed. Steve charged forward. He never missed any battle that needed him, and never fell behind the team. For this man, standing in front of everyone has almost become his instinct. Even if the weapon changed from shield to long sword, this has never changed. He moved forward and swung the sword. The power beyond mortals, even beyond the prime arch, beat in his heart. It was a power that should not exist in the real universe. The golden flame lit up and burned on the blade with his mind and breath. The orcs feared the flame, and anything that was not human feared it. They fled in all directions, unable to even organize an effective counterattack, and their fate was actually determined when they decided to turn their backs on Steve and run away. The surging golden flame seemed to have self-awareness as they streaked through the air. Any orcs in sight were burned to ashes by the flames. Not even a cell was left. "At least this place doesn't need us to call a warship to clean up the surface," Pablo told a cold joke in the communication channel. Once again, he was met with his brother's angry glare. Although the other's eyes were covered by the cold eyepiece of the helmet, the disapproving look had penetrated the eyepiece. "Why are you looking at me like that?" While chatting, he did not fall behind in his work. Gunshots continued to ring out, killing the orcs who ran from all directions and did not face Steve directly but still believed that they had a chance of winning. The reason why Pablo loved to tell bad jokes and was still able to serve as a non-commissioned officer in the Crimson Fists was because of his shooting skills. "Stop showing off your weird sense of humor," a gloomy voice came from the communication channel. "Otherwise, I will let you stay on guard in the next battle." "Don't be like that, Chapter Master. A sense of humor is my innate talent, just like the steady right hand that pulls the trigger." Pablo grinned, and the shadow of an orc's upper body being beaten to pieces was reflected on his retina. "You have to let me use it." "Then shut up." The Chapter Master finally couldn't stand it anymore and cursed in the communication channel. "Or at least adjust your damn radio settings. You haven't stopped talking for a minute since the start of the battle." Pablo curled his lips and closed his mouth reluctantly. This situation is not uncommon for other brothers in the chapter. Everyone knows that Pablo Cabas is an endless chatterbox. He tells bad jokes, but he just likes to tell them. He has good shooting skills. However, there is one thing they don't know. Perhaps it is because they are all the same in this regard. That is, Pablo Cabas is willing to die for his brothers. At the moment he closed his mouth, a chill suddenly rose from the bottom of his heart. He raised his head suddenly and saw a silver light flashing above his head. There was no room for words, but what Pablo Cabas did at the last moment of his life saved the lives of the other three brothers closest to him. He opened the ejection stand on his waist. This new technology can knock out everyone around, thus ensuring that the shooter has a relatively good design environment, specially assigned to non-commissioned officers with excellent shooting skills like him. However, I am afraid that Pablo himself did not expect that the first time he used this thing was before he died. With the flash of silver light, a huge green figure fell to the ground frantically. The ejection stand had no effect on it at all. The light blue stand that should have worked disappeared after a twist, allowing it to step on Pablo with both feet, and then it swung the axe in its hand. Wah! This green-skinned bastard, who was more than a circle larger than the other orcs, was at least 3 meters tall, but his terrifying horizontal body made him look taller than he actually was. What was worse was that he was also very fast. When the roar resounded throughout the battlefield, when this despicable and cunning sneak attack had just ended, the orc had already pulled out his extremely rough chainsaw axe, which looked like a patchwork of garbage, from Pablo's body and rushed towards another Crimson Fist warrior. The latter was still dizzy from being knocked away, but his superhuman reaction speed saved his life. He rolled over with all his strength, and this insignificant roll allowed him to avoid the fatal blow. Then, the Crimson Fist's counterattack also arrived, but it was ineffective. Bombs hit the orc's armor one after another, but none of them really penetrated the armor and hit its flesh. Any explosive bullets that tried to shoot at its head without a helmet would be distorted by the invisible force and fall to the side. This strange scene quickly confirmed one thing for the chapter master. This was the war boss of the orcs. "Get out of the way." Just as he was about to issue an order, a figure passed by him at high speed, with a golden shadow. With incomparable fury, Steve slashed the orc's shoulder armor with a sword. The flaming sword sank a little, but did not go deeper. Steve narrowed his eyes. This was the first time since he got the sword that he had not directly killed an enemy. Because of this, he suddenly realized something. The huge orc opened its ferocious mouth and said in a low Gothic language that could torture people to death, "I knew it. You are the same as me." It proudly waved the giant axe in its hand, forced Steve back, and then roared, "Come on, the boss of the cans. Brother Go and Brother Mao are watching me. What about you? Where is the person protecting you? He should be watching here too." Tell all the cans that are in the way to get out of the way. Let's have a real fight. For some reason, Steve actually felt that he saw a serious look on the ugly and fierce face of the orc. After a brief thought, despite the strong opposition of the Crimson Fists, he gave the order to disperse, and then stood face to face with the orc boss in the sea of blood and corpses of the orcs. That's it. The orc smiled with satisfaction, and the smile was so innocent that it created a strong contrast with itself. Come on, King Boss. Either you kill me or I kill you. Steve did not answer it. To be precise, he did not answer it with words, but answered it with actions. The long sword burning with golden flames flew across the sky, and was narrowly blocked by the orc's giant axe. It let out a deafening roar, lowered its shoulders and rushed towards Steve, with the spikes on its shoulders flashing dangerously. Steve did not intend to resist this move, and he retreated quickly. At the same time, his left hand suddenly raised, and the psychic power quickly achieved its goal, and the air began to be drawn away from the orc's head. Steve was very experienced in dealing with such a huge enemy. He knew that he had to restrict the opponent's movements in order to win. Because of this, he chose to make it difficult for it to breathe. However, something happened that he could not understand. With a wah, Steve's psychic energy was instantly driven away. The orc roared again, and rushed towards Steve fiercely, shouting, "Ken Boss is not honest. I'm angry." What's going on? Frowning, Steve dodged the axe it chopped at. He kicked the axe so that it couldn't recover quickly. At the same time, the flaming sword had already stabbed into its chest. The heavy but shoddy armor actually blocked the attack again. Not only that, the orc even wanted to laugh at it. Ha 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 ha. Ken Boss, I have Brother Gamao to protect me. It winked at Steve. You can't beat me. Brother Gamao was looking here. A sense of absurdity made Steve bite his back teeth. He even had the urge to swear. Seriously? Brother Gamao? What the hell is this nonsense name? Just as he was about to swing his sword again, he heard a roar that echoed throughout the battlefield. The orc leader laughed proudly. Look, Ken Boss, my guys are back, because they know that Brother Gamao is watching us. It was right. The fleeing orcs were quickly occupying the high ground around them, standing on the bodies of their companions without caring. They even began to snatch the teeth and the mouths or weapons in the hands of their companions. However, they were back after all, and they were shouting the name of Brother Gamao. Brother Gamao, Brother Mao, Brother Gamao, Brother Mao. They shouted these two names in unison, and their voices resounded through the sky. Steve squinted his eyes. His excessive psychic power allowed him to see some blurry scenes. For example, two huge green figures covering the sky, with cunning and cruel scarlet light in their eyes. As if they noticed Steve's gaze, they actually cast a quick glance at him. Gritting his teeth, Steve held the sword in his hand tightly to prevent it from falling. The quick glance of the two things made him feel extremely pressured, almost like standing in the Garden of Nurgle. He didn't know if it was an illusion, but he always felt that they had no intention of killing him. Come on, Ken Boss. Stop using your despicable strength. Fight me here in an upright manner. If you win, you will have everything. If you lose, my boys and I will not be polite to your black house and armor. The guy pounded his chest generously, and the sound of metal clashing rang out. Steve couldn't help but smile a little. He had to admit it. Compared with fighting demons and traitors, the temperament of the orcs was more to his liking. Well, what's your name, orc? My name is Torg. It shouted the name proudly. Remember, I'm protected by Brother Gamao. Okay, Turgmo. My name is Steve Rogers. I hope you remember this name too. Steve raised the sword in his hand seriously. No matter what the result is, I agree that you are an opponent worthy of fighting. Come on. As soon as the voice fell, they roared at the same time. On the other side of the galaxy, Shenyan, who was far away on the glory of Macragge, suddenly frowned. That expression made Gilliman breathe carefully. In the past 8 hours, he was picked out by the wizard for various problems more than once. No matter how well he thought he did, he could always find shortcomings. This made him almost have a shadow on this matter. However, this time the wizard frowned not because there was something wrong with him. Shenyan's mood at this time can only be described as absurd. He has the psychic power of the Emperor and has been connected with the spirit of all mankind. Thanks to this, he can vaguely perceive the status of some people, for example, Steve on the other side of the galaxy, or Fulgrim who is still on Istvant 3. However, just now, he found that Steve was blessed by something in the warp, not just one, but two. Closing his eyes, he followed the clues from the warp and found that it was the two orc gods he had never wanted to contact. They were no different from the images of orcs, but they were magnified millions of times. Standing above the chaotic cosmic flow of the warp, these two figures noticed his arrival at the first time, and one of them snorted coldly, "What are you looking at?" "That's right, what are you looking at?" the other asked fiercely. "We don't like being peeped at." Shenyan's eyes twitched, and he immediately withdrew from the warp. Chapter 674 Broken Soul. Guilliman looked at Shenyan who had just opened his eyes, and asked cautiously, "What's wrong?" "It has nothing to do with you, Guilliman. You did a good job." The mage gave a forced smile. "Like I said, you are indeed quite talented in enchantment and enhancement." "That's not what you said when you were picking on me just now," Guilliman secretly complained, but still nodded reservedly, with a smile on his lips. "So, what made you frown?" 3 seconds later, he began to regret asking this question, because he heard Shenyan say, "Steve was blessed by two orc gods." Huh? Guilliman's expression gradually became confused, and he froze as if he didn't understand the words of the mage at all. It was not until 3 seconds later that his superhuman brain came back to his senses, and his first reaction was, "Did I hear it wrong?" "You didn't hear it wrong." Shenyan rubbed his brows with a headache. "At present, the blessings of the two orc gods were sincere. Although the amount is small, it does not contain any malice. Considering the power attributes of these two guys cannot be called evil gods." A sense of absurdity rose in his heart. "Steve, what did you do to make these two guys bless you?" Shaking his head, he sighed. "Continue your practice, Guilliman. As I said, the personality illusion I created can only work for you for a week. During this week, you must at least learn Titan power and exorcism of evil and this improved sunlight healing." Facing Guilliman's expectant eyes, he smiled. "Of course, there is also this personality illusion that you want to learn the most." "I don't understand, Guilliman. If you really hate paperwork so much, why not let others do it?" It would have been better if he didn't mention this. As soon as he mentioned it, Guilliman immediately started his endless complaints. "I don't want to either," Guilliman said sincerely. "If there are other candidates, I will immediately hand over the paperwork to them. Immediately. Now. I will gather an expedition without looking back and launch a battle against the Eye of Terror. I will personally take back those planets ravaged by chaos." "But I can't," the Primarch of the Ultramarines said with a distorted expression, "because there is no one in this empire who can replace me." He even uttered a rare curse. At the same time, the wizard's right hand glowed with a faint golden light, and the psychic energy turned into a visualized giant palm and hit Guilliman's back of the head. Facing the regent's puzzled eyes, Shenyan sighed. He raised his hands. "That's not me. Your father is always watching you, Guilliman. He is very dissatisfied with you for swearing." "Well, although I think he did make a fuss." Shrugging his shoulders, Shenyan said, "But by the way, you will soon be freed from the heavy paperwork and government affairs." Guilliman raised his eyebrows. "Yes. That's what you think," the wizard said with a smile. "He is in the warp." A man with a green leaf crown and healthy wheat-colored skin was walking in a chaos. He was obviously disgusted with this scene, but he did not change it. The chaos storm full of evil energy in the warp blew across his face, but did not hurt him at all. He walked between the broken planets, as if walking on the stable earth. He was chasing some people he had failed and regarded as tools. His son. The silent walking lasted for a long time. In the warp, time should be the most meaningless thing, but the man could easily know the speed of time in the outside world. He could even distract himself and slap his son who could not manage his emotions. Therefore, he knew that he had been walking like this for 3 years, but it was meaningless. Where exactly? He stopped here and heard only the whistling and hollow sound of the wind. The rock-like firm face showed a rare look of pain. "Where are you, my sons?" The sound of the wind remained the same, hollow, carrying the screams of the dead. There was only darkness and disorder all around, and this chaotic space had never changed. It had been like this since its birth. The Emperor of Mankind closed his eyes, and a tear fell from his right eye, not for himself, but for his lost sons. What should he do to find you? He listened to the whistling wind, the manic wind, the wind full of pain, until a certain moment, a call sounded in his ears. Father. The Emperor suddenly opened his eyes, golden light flashed, his eyes were ignited, and his breathing was no longer long, but bursting, because he had already heard who the voice belonged to, and what kind of pain was contained in that voice. A sword appeared in his hand, the flame ignited, golden, burning everything and tearing open the fragile space. The Lord of Mankind opened a door with his belated fatherly love and anger, and a pink and purple light flickered behind it. He walked in without hesitation, and then a feminine voice came from inside. What's wrong with you? Where's my son? His roar was like thunder. I know he is with you. Give it back to me, otherwise I will tear down your domain and kill every creature in this space that can bring you happiness. You are getting more and more irritable, old man, the feminine voice said reluctantly. Why are you always like this? You have killed the blue bird, isn't that enough? Hey, how did you know he was with me? I just took it back from the blue bird's corpse. Give it back to me. Slaanesh finally got angry. Give it back to you. Give it back to you. Give it back to you. I don't want it yet. He doesn't talk to me at all, and keeps complaining about himself there. I've had enough. Take your son and get out, old thing. You primitive man who can't get hard. Cowardly uck. Raging golden flames poured out from the door, and Slaanesh cried out in pain. Under the Emperor's psychic power, he could not feel any pleasure, only the purest pain, although his divinity was quickly transforming it into happiness. Those few seconds of pain were still somewhat unbearable for him. The angry evil god threw the Emperor and the broken soul in his arms out of his domain and closed the door in a rage. If I can't afford to provoke you, can't I hide from you? Wait, sooner or later I will destroy your empire. He couldn't finish his words again. The Emperor threw a concentrated psychic bomb into the door at the last moment. After doing all this, he became quiet. The broken soul in his arms stared blankly at the front. He had lost his mind and only had instincts. And in that instinct there was only regret, guilt, and pain. These things completely overwhelmed him. The Lord of Mankind closed his eyes painfully and returned to the realm of the world with the broken soul. I can't sleep, so I'll write another chapter. It's painful to type on the phone, and the days in the detention center are not as pleasant as I thought. TSK. The weather is getting colder. Writing Warhammer is actually a very pleasant thing, although I have to look up a lot of information, and I can't guarantee that it is correct. I almost have to cut off after writing twice to see if there is anything I missed. GW's problem of eating the book is too serious. Take Dorn's hand for example. Is he alive or dead? It all depends on GW's mouth. I can only say that it is painful and happy. After all, there are too many stories to write in this universe. There is too little time, and I can't put what I have in my mind on the keyboard instantly. Chapter 675. Be a human being, Emperor. The broken body can be cured, but what about the broken soul? This sentence kept echoing in the Emperor's mind. He couldn't save his son in his arms. He knew it very well, but maybe someone else would have a way? With this thought, he tore open the warp and returned to the material realm. The cold vacuum was more comfortable than the environment of the warp. A golden door opened under his feet and slowly swallowed him. When he appeared again, he had arrived on the glory of Macragge. Guilliman looked at him in astonishment, still holding the lavender light in his hand, and 3 magic circles were suspended behind his head. Originally, his first Titan's power was about to be perfectly cast, but the appearance of the Emperor obviously stopped the process. With a snap, the 3 magic circles exploded in unison. The lavender light suddenly lost control and turned into a surging pure magic power that began to rebel in Guilliman's hands. He quickly closed his palms and pressed it down, and the magic power gradually subsided. Shenyan complained, "You came at the right time." He was about to succeed. The Emperor's expression remained calm on the surface, but his slightly trembling lips betrayed something. He held his right hand in front of his chest, as if he was holding a child. The mage didn't say much, but he knew his intention with just a casual glance. Shenyan approached him, and as the distance got closer, His expression gradually became serious. He stretched out his hand, and the emperor allowed him to take the broken soul in his arms, but his eyes became more complicated. After observing carefully for several minutes, until this uneasy silence was about to make Guilliman ask, Shenyan finally spoke. "There is still hope." The emperor breathed a sigh of relief, and that expression made Guilliman feel strange in his heart. He had never seen his father so humane, whether before or after he sat on the chair. He had never been like this. Because of this, he began to feel a little curious. "Which brother of mine is this?" As if he had read his mind, the wizard turned around, smiled evilly, and slowly said a name, "Horus." Guilliman's pupils shrank to the size of a pinpoint. "You didn't have to tell him that this was the soul of Horus." "But I thought." He almost lost control just now. This is the first time I've seen Guilliman so irritable. "Oh, my majesty, please be considerate of your son." He used a lot of willpower to prevent himself from cursing on the spot. In the wizard's pocket dimension, the two were standing in his laboratory. The surroundings were filled with books purchased from various worlds in the White Tower, and some special objects with magical powers. There were even some special magical creatures in the cage in the corner. Shenyan raised his right hand and took off a star that was shining above his head. The light in the room dimmed a little, but soon another newly born star filled its place. He took the tiny star and began to pour magic into it, but he still did not forget to talk to the emperor. "But I was actually quite surprised." "What?" "The first son you found turned out to be him." The wizard raised his eyebrows and smiled brightly. "I thought you would rescue the one in the webway first. He and his offspring have been in there for 10,000 years. The warp obscures my vision," the emperor said bitterly. "This chaotic and disordered space has a certain instinct. It hates me, so it instinctively blocks anything that is beneficial to me." "That's easy to do." Shenyan lowered his head. "Just change your power attribute, your majesty. It only has instincts, just like animals that distinguish people by smell. Or, I can do it for you." "No, let me do this." After a long silence, the emperor rejected his proposal. Shenyan knew what the emperor was thinking without looking at him. It was nothing but guilt. He wanted to personally bring back all the sons he had lost. Only in this way could it be considered compensation. However, while the wizard used his mental power to shape the star into a body, he said, "Although I would like to tell you that belated fatherly love is nothing. But if you really do that, they should also feel a little comforted." "But what do you plan to do with those who really turn to chaos?" The emperor's facial lines gradually became hard, and his jaw muscles exerted force, making his face flat and deep. "I will correct my mistakes one by one. Then I wish you good luck." "Ha! Every time I think of this, I am a little amused. Your poor father-son relationship and family concept are really amazing." The emperor finally couldn't hold it back. He pursed his lips. "Can you stop laughing at this? I know I am a very bad father, and I know that my rare humanity in the past is the reason why mankind has finally fallen into this state. If you keep doing this, then I will keep laughing at you." Shenyan raised his head, his eyes calm. "Don't take all the blame on yourself. You are just a human. Yes, you can pull the stars and extinguish the sun, but that has nothing to do with your mind. The human mind is the strongest and most fragile thing in the world. Even you are no exception. Maybe you think it is a good thing to take all the mistakes and responsibilities on yourself, but in fact, it is not," he said mercilessly. "Imagine, if you put aside this arrogance of I must be the one and communicate well with your sons. Do you think they will betray you? Be a human being, Emperor." Shenyan shook his head and said nothing more. "Xingqian has been shaped into a human body, but he is not as tall as the original body, and he is only about 1.8 meters tall. His childish face makes him look like a teenager." The emperor stared at the familiar facial features and fell into a trance again. This is what his son looked like when he was a teenager, and what he looked like when he was absent. A hand passed in front of him, bringing the emperor back to his senses. He saw Shenyan's calm face and heard his even somewhat impatient voice. "Stop complaining about yourself, old man. Where is his soul?" "Here." The emperor carefully took out a transparent fragment from his chest. The mage reached out to take it and narrowed his eyes, in order to avoid medical disputes. I think I'd better explain to you what I'm going to do next. The Emperor immediately put on an attitude of listening attentively. There's no need to be so nervous. Listen, the Horus Lupercal you're familiar with, his personality and even his soul were shattered in the long torture. People can look at themselves more clearly after death, and when he is isolated from the influence of chaos on his body, his soul feels extremely sad about what he has done. Guilt, regret, self-blame and a crazy urge to commit suicide. This is 80% of your son's soul now, although he only has a fragment left. Surprisingly, neither Tzeentch nor Slaanesh could corrupt his soul after death. Considering that I'm the only mage and master of soul studies here, I think I need to tell you, Shenyan said slowly. He will come back to life, but his memory will be missing. He will often suffer from hysteria, and in hallucinations, he will see what he did in the past. He will be tortured by such torture over and over again and ill. Until what? The Emperor asked tremblingly. Even the tips of his fingers trembled. Until he finally forgives himself. Now, you can go out. Now is the time for doctors and patients. Family members should not stay here and get in the way. After saying that, Shenyan ruthlessly drove the Emperor out without any respect for the Emperor. Guilliman was sighing over and over again. Why can't I release it? He stared at his palm with resentment. The lavender light gathered on it again, but it quickly dissipated again. Seeing this scene, Guilliman's eyes finally twitched. I almost succeeded once. Thinking of this, his facial features wrinkled into a ball. If his descendants saw this expression, they might draw their swords and shout demon, leave the body of the Primarch and other nonsense and rush towards him. Will they? Guilliman suddenly felt a strange sense of humor in his heart. At this moment, he finally realized that he had a talent for telling jokes. Of course, it might also be because he had been with the mage for too long and was infected by his inappropriate sense of humor. Anyway, just as he tried to use Titan power without Shenyan's guidance, a golden light flashed, and the Emperor appeared in his room again. When he was not really angry or did not intend to fight, the Emperor's body was not huge. It was just the size of an ordinary person. Perhaps, in the distant past, when he had not yet discovered his true nature, he walked on terra in this appearance. Guilliman stared at his father with complicated eyes. After a long time, he remembered that he should greet him. Good day, father. He saw that the Emperor looked at him absent-mindedly and forced a smile. Good day, Robert. TSK. The expression of the Imperial Regent was gradually becoming unhappy, but he still controlled it. So, he went to treat Horus. After saying this, he was surprised to find that he could actually say Horus' name smoothly. He thought he would never be able to mention this name again, but the fact is that he said it out without any pause. Yes. With a sigh, the Emperor stood in front of the porthole with his hands behind his back. The view of Terra Station was in full view, but this wonder of mankind did not make him feel as proud as before. A sense of sadness and uncertainty about the future was making his heart beat fast. Robert Guilliman stared at his father's back, and suddenly felt that he was so lonely and sad. He shook his head to dispel this sentimentality that came from nowhere. He stood up, walked behind the Emperor, and put his hand on his shoulder. Father and son, the two stood in front of the porthole of this room on Macrag's Glory. They stared at the scene outside the window together. They waited together, and were silent together. It was not until a long time later that crackling sounds began to sound in the room, and the two turned their heads. A blue light suddenly appeared, and a wizard holding a young boy appeared in the room. He looked tired. The speed of time in the pocket dimension was different from that in the outside world. It was obvious that he had been there for more than a while. What happened? Without answering the Emperor's question, Shenyan snapped his fingers, conjured up a bed, put the boy on it, and began to answer the Emperor's question. He knows his name, vaguely knows what he will do in the future, and his mind has returned to his childhood. That's all I have to say. You can slowly experience it yourself. I'm going to rest. After saying this, he immediately disappeared from the spot. The Emperor began to pace around the bed nervously, while Guilliman, who was standing beside him, stared at the sleeping boy and felt more and more that something was wrong. Why is this face so familiar? He raised his hand to cover the boy's short hair, and then took a breath of cold air. Emperor. Oh, The Emperor is next to me. The Emperor next to me. He turned his head and looked at the Emperor, who was trying his best to stay calm, and he had 10,000 questions in his mind. Steve pulled out the flaming sword with great effort. The orc who called himself Trijma fought with him for a full 18 minutes without stopping. Both of them were forced into a desperate situation by the other. Trijma was an extremely dangerous opponent. Its beast-like cunning and sharpness allowed it to dodge many changes of sword moves without any instruction. What made Steve even more uncomfortable was that Trijma was stronger than him, which meant that he could not wrestle with the opponent and could only adopt roundabout tactics. After trying hard to block for more than 10 rounds, he finally found the flaw of the orc and sent the flaming sword into its chest armor that had been chopped many times. The clear touch of the flesh made Steve know that he had won. Trijma fell to the ground and coughed twice with effort. The torturous low Gothic language did not sound so difficult to accept at this time. "You won, King Boss." "I lost." It laughed twice. "But don't think this is the end. War will never end. We will keep warring." "The same goes for you, Boss Khan. You have to war with me." After saying his last words, Trijma lost his breath and life. At the same time, the warriors of the Crimson Fist also breathed a sigh of relief. However, what happened next almost made all of them fall to the ground. The orcs all over the mountains began to shout Steve's name in their rough voices and vague low Gothic. "Boss Steve! Boss Steve! Boss Steve!" Steve took off his helmet and said nothing. He looked at the orcs who cheered for him sincerely, and for a moment he had the urge to open his mouth and wah. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.